Hi guys, welcome back to my channel, and today we begin an epic journey into the timeless world of ancient India as we explore the legendary kings and commanders of the Ramayana and the Mahabharata, two vast oceans of history, mythology, philosophy, and human emotion that have shaped the cultural soul of the subcontinent for thousands of years. Stories that are not merely tales of gods and heroes but deep reflections on duty, power, loyalty, sacrifice, and the eternal struggle between righteousness and ambition. In this series, we will walk through battlefields where destiny was forged, royal courts where moral dilemmas decided the fate of nations, and forests where exile transformed princes into legends, uncovering the lives of iconic rulers like Rama, the ideal king whose reign became the benchmark of justice and governance, and Yudhishthira, the embodiment of dharma who ruled not through fear but through moral authority, while also examining the towering presence of warrior kings such as Ravana, a scholar and emperor whose brilliance was rivaled only by his pride, and Duryodhana, a tragic monarch driven by envy yet unwavering loyalty to his friends. Alongside these rulers stand the great commanders and generals, men whose strategies and courage turned the tide of history, from Hanuman, the indomitable Vanara general whose devotion and strength defied all limits, to Bhishma, the grand patriarch whose oath shaped generations and whose mastery of warfare made him nearly invincible, and from Lakshmana, the tireless guardian who fought not for glory but for love and duty, to Karna, the tragic sun-born warrior whose unmatched generosity and battlefield skill could not save him from the weight of fate. This series is not about choosing sides between gods and demons or Pandavas and Kauravas, but about understanding the human choices behind legendary actions, the emotions that fueled wars, and the lessons hidden beneath divine weapons and celestial boons. Because every king we discuss ruled not only lands and armies but also their own inner conflicts, every commander fought not just enemies but destiny itself. We will explore how leadership was defined in ancient times, where a ruler's greatness was measured not by conquest alone but by adherence to dharma, how commanders balanced strategy with honor, how loyalty could be both a virtue and a curse, and how even the mightiest warriors were bound by consequences of their decisions. Through vivid storytelling, historical context, and thoughtful interpretation, this series will bring these ancient figures to life, allowing us to see them not as distant myths carved in stone but as living characters whose struggles mirror our own questions about right and wrong, ambition and restraint, power and responsibility. As we move forward episode by episode, you will witness legendary duels that shook the heavens, councils where a single word changed history, and moments of silence where a king's choice mattered more than any weapon, reminding us why the Ramayana and the Mahabharata have endured across millennia, retold in countless languages, arts, and traditions. So if you love epic history, legendary warfare, complex characters, and stories that challenge the mind as much as they thrill the imagination, make sure you stay with me on this journey, because this is not just a series about ancient kings and commanders. This is a journey into the heart of civilization itself, where legends were born, values were tested, and the echoes of those ancient battles still resonate in our world today. Part 1 of the Ramayana and Mahabharata Legendary Kings and Commanders series begins at the dawn of an age when rulership was inseparable from moral responsibility and warfare was bound by sacred codes, an era in which kings were not merely political figures but living symbols of cosmic order, and commanders were guardians of both strategy and honor, shaping destinies that would echo across millennia. In the Ramayana, this ideal of kingship finds its purest expression in Rama of Ayodhya, born to King Dashratha of the Solar dynasty, a prince whose life became a continuous test of dharma, for though destined to rule, Rama accepted exile without protest, placing duty above desire and setting a standard of leadership rooted in sacrifice, patience, and compassion, qualities that transformed him from a royal heir into a universal archetype of the righteous king. Dashratha himself represents the tragic weight of royal vows, a ruler whose promise, once given, became unbreakable even when it shattered his own happiness, showing how kings in these epics were bound by their word more tightly than by chains. Opposite Rama stands Ravana, the mighty emperor of Lanka, a king general whose intellect, devotion to Shiva, and mastery of warfare made him one of the most formidable rulers in epic literature, yet whose unchecked pride and desire ultimately led him to defy dharma. Illustrating how brilliance without humility can turn strength into ruin, Ravana's court was not a realm of chaos, but of discipline, scholarship, and military excellence, commanded by generals and warriors who fought with fierce loyalty, reminding us that even those labeled villains were complex rulers with ordered societies and strategic minds. Alongside these kings rose commanders whose actions shaped the course of the war, most notably Hanuman, the Vanara general whose allegiance to Rama redefined the meaning of service. For Hanuman fought not for territory or reward but out of absolute devotion. His leaps across oceans and battles against demonic armies symbolizing the limitless power of faith combined with courage. As the Ramayana unfolds, leadership emerges as a balance between authority and restraint, power and mercy, a theme that carries forward into the Mahabharata, where the scale widens and the moral landscape becomes far more complex and conflicted. The Mahabharata opens within the Kuru dynasty, where King Shantanu and his descendants lay the foundation for a war that would engulf the entire subcontinent, and it is here that Bhishma rises as both kingmaker and supreme commander, a man bound by a terrible vow of celibacy and loyalty to the throne, whose unmatched prowess on the battlefield was rivaled only by his tragic inability to prevent injustice within the royal house he served. Bhishma's leadership reflects a haunting dilemma, the conflict between loyalty to authority and loyalty to righteousness, a question that lies at the heart of the Mahabharata. The Pandavas and Kauravas, princes raised together yet divided by fate and ambition, inherited not only a kingdom but a legacy of unresolved moral tension, with Duryodhana emerging as a king driven by resentment and fear of loss, yet possessing undeniable courage and devotion to his allies, and Yudhishthira standing as his opposite, a ruler whose commitment to truth and dharma often came at the cost of political advantage. Within this fractured royal landscape arose commanders of extraordinary skill, men like Drona, the master strategist and teacher whose knowledge of warfare was absolute, yet whose personal attachments led him to choices that blurred the line between justice and loyalty, and Karna, the sun-born warrior whose life as a commander was defined by generosity, honor, and tragedy, a king without a kingdom who fought with unmatched valor while burdened by the knowledge of a destiny he could never fully escape. Part 1 of the series lays the foundation for understanding how kingship and command were perceived in these epics, not as simple roles of dominance but as sacred trusts laden with ethical consequences, where every decision on the throne and every order on the battlefield carried karmic weight. As we move forward, we will see how these rulers and generals shaped wars that were not merely contests of weapons but collisions of ideals, setting the stage for conflicts that would redefine dharma itself and leave behind lessons that remain hauntingly relevant even in the modern world. Part 2 of the Ramayana and Mahabharata Legendary Kings and Commanders series moves deeper into the heart of epic leadership, where the ideals introduced earlier are tested under the crushing weight of war, exile, betrayal, and irreversible choices, revealing that greatness in these ancient narratives is never pure triumph but always shadowed by consequence. In the Ramayana, the forced exile of Rama transforms from a personal trial into a crucible of command, as he evolves from a prince who obeys dharma to a leader who must enforce it, gathering allies not through conquest but through trust, forging bonds with the Vanara clans under leaders like Sugriva, whose own kingship is restored not by divine right but by Rama's adherence to justice and loyalty, demonstrating a model of intervention where power is used to correct wrongs rather than exploit them. Rama's command style is quiet yet unyielding, marked by restraint even in moments of overwhelming strength, a contrast that becomes sharper when set against Ravana's militarized empire, where discipline and fear coexist with brilliance, and where commanders such as Indrajit, Ravana's son, embody tactical genius and ruthless efficiency, mastering celestial weapons and battlefield deception, showing how superior strategy and technological might can challenge even morally grounded leadership. The clash between Rama and Ravana thus becomes more than a battle between good and evil, it is a collision between two philosophies of rule, one grounded in dharma and collective harmony, the other in dominance and personal will, and it is through their generals that these philosophies are expressed in war. Figures like Angada and Nala emerge as commanders whose engineering skill and battlefield coordination make the impossible possible, such as the construction of the bridge to Lanka, reminding us that leadership in the Ramayana is also about innovation, logistics, and unity across diverse forces. As the narrative shifts toward the Mahabharata, the complexity of kingship intensifies, for here rulers are trapped within webs of kinship and political obligation that make moral clarity elusive. The Pandavas' rise after years of exile reveals Yudhishthira as a king who governs through conscience rather than intimidation, yet whose devotion to truth repeatedly places his commanders at risk, forcing warriors like Arjuna and Bhishma to balance obedience with moral frustration. Arjuna, as a commander and warrior, represents the inner conflict of duty-bound leadership, a man whose skill with the bow is unmatched, yet whose hesitation on the battlefield exposes the psychological cost of fratricidal war, a crisis resolved not through command but through philosophical revelation, marking a unique moment where spiritual discourse becomes a tool of military leadership. On the opposing side, Duryodhana consolidates power through unwavering loyalty to his commanders, particularly Karna, whose appointment as a king underscores how leadership in the Mahabharata often defies social hierarchy, valuing merit and allegiance over birth, yet this same loyalty blinds Duryodhana to counsel, leading him to reject peace even when defeat is imminent. The battlefield of Kurukshetra becomes a vast stage where commanders like Drona and Bhishma dictate the rhythm of war, each day defined by formations, counter-formations, and strategic sacrifices, illustrating a level of military organization that rivals any historical campaign, while also exposing the moral erosion that prolonged conflict brings, as rules are bent and vows are broken in the pursuit of victory. Karna's role as a commander grows increasingly tragic, for despite his honor and generosity, he is forced into decisions that contradict his own values, revealing how loyalty to an unjust cause can destroy even the noblest warrior. Part 2 underscores that in both epics, leadership is never static, kings and commanders are shaped and reshaped by circumstance, their virtues sharpened or corrupted by pressure, and their legacies defined as much by their failures as by their triumphs. As the wars escalate and choices narrow, the line between righteousness and necessity blurs, preparing the ground for the final acts where the cost of leadership will be paid in full, and where the true meaning of victory will be questioned by survivors standing amid the ruins of kingdoms they fought to rule. Part 3 of the Ramayana and Mahabharata legendary kings and commanders series arrives at the decisive moments where leadership is no longer defined by intention or philosophy but by irreversible action, when kings and generals must confront the full weight of their past choices and accept outcomes that cannot be undone, revealing that in these epics destiny does not excuse responsibility but magnifies it. In the Ramayana, the war for Lanka reaches its climactic phase as Rama's alliance advances into the heart of Ravana's empire, and it is here that command becomes a test of endurance and moral clarity, with generals like Lakshmana stepping fully into independent leadership, carrying the burden of decisive strikes and strategic judgment, particularly in his duel with Indrajit, where discipline, sacrifice, and unwavering focus overcome illusions and superior weaponry, symbolizing how clarity of purpose can pierce even the most sophisticated defenses. The fall of Indrajit marks a turning point not only in the war but in Ravana's command structure, exposing the vulnerability of a kingdom built around singular brilliance. And as Ravana himself enters the battlefield, the contrast between king and commander collapses, for he must now fight as both sovereign and soldier, confronting Rama not merely as an enemy but as a mirror of what righteous power could have been. The final duel between Rama and Ravana is framed not as a triumph of force but as the restoration of cosmic balance, with Rama's adherence to dharma guiding even his killing blow, followed by acts of mercy that reaffirm his role as an ideal ruler rather than a conqueror. And yet the victory carries sorrow, reminding us that just leadership still demands painful sacrifice. The aftermath of Lanka's fall reveals another dimension of kingship, as Vibhishana ascends the throne under Rama's guidance, illustrating how true command includes the responsibility to rebuild and reconcile, not merely to defeat. As the focus shifts fully to the Mahabharata, the Kurukshetra war descends into its most brutal and morally ambiguous phase, where commanders operate under relentless pressure and ethical boundaries erode day by day, beginning with Bhishma's fall, a moment that shatters the illusion of invincibility surrounding the grandsire, whose defeat through strategic manipulation rather than direct combat forces both sides to confront the uncomfortable truth that victory often demands compromise of ideals. Drona's command marks a colder, more calculating stage of the war, where emotional vulnerability becomes a weapon, and his eventual death, driven by deception surrounding his son, stands as one of the most tragic examples of how personal attachment can be exploited in total war, leaving behind a battlefield victory stained with moral loss. Karna's ascension as supreme commander represents the final surge of heroic resistance from the Kaurava side, and under his leadership the war regains a sense of honor and direct confrontation, yet fate tightens its grip as curses, broken promises, and accumulated injustice converge to ensure that his unmatched valor cannot alter the outcome, culminating in his duel with Arjuna, where skill meets destiny and loyalty meets irreversible consequence. Karna's fall is not portrayed as a simple defeat, but as the extinguishing of a life shaped by denial and misplaced allegiance, forcing the Pandavas themselves to reckon with the cost of their victory. The final command of Shalaya and the death of Duryodhana bring the war to its brutal conclusion, stripping kingship down to its barest form, where pride, exhaustion, and grief replace strategy and ambition, and where Yudhishthira's eventual coronation feels less like triumph and more like a burden accepted in silence. Part 3 emphasizes that in both the Ramayana and the Mahabharata, the end of war does not restore innocence. Kings and commanders emerge transformed, carrying scars that define their reigns and legacies, and victory is shown not as an endpoint but as a moment of reckoning, where the true measure of leadership lies in how rulers respond to loss, responsibility, and the shattered worlds left behind, setting the stage for reflections on renunciation, governance, and the enduring moral questions that these epics leave for humanity to confront. Part 4 of the Ramayana and Mahabharata legendary kings and commander series turns away from the clash of weapons and toward the quieter yet heavier aftermath of power, where leadership is measured not on the battlefield but in the difficult art of ruling, healing, and accepting the consequences of victory, revealing that the greatest trials of kings and commanders often begin only after the war has ended. In the Ramayana, Rama's return to Ayodhya marks the restoration of rightful rule, yet it also exposes the burden of being an ideal king in an imperfect world. For Rama must now balance personal emotion with public duty, showing that kingship in the epic tradition demands absolute accountability to the people, even when it inflicts personal suffering, a theme that reaches its most painful expression in the trials faced by Sita, reminding us that leadership guided by dharma can still produce tragedy when societal expectation overrides compassion. Rama's reign, remembered as Ram Rajya, becomes less a tale of conquest and more a model of governance rooted in justice, restraint, and welfare, where commanders are no longer warriors but administrators, guardians of peace, and symbols of stability, and where figures like Lakshmana transition from battlefield generals to pillars of civil order, illustrating how true command adapts to changing needs. The elevation of Vibhishana in Lanka further reinforces this ideal, as Rama ensures that former enemies are reintegrated rather than annihilated, emphasizing reconciliation over revenge and demonstrating that sustainable rule depends on legitimacy and moral authority rather than fear. As the narrative lends widens to the Mahabharata, the aftermath of Kurukshetra reveals a kingdom devastated not only in land and population but in spirit, with Yudhishthira ascending the throne of Hastinapura burdened by guilt so profound that kingship itself feels like a curse, and it is here that the epic delivers its most powerful meditation on power, showing a ruler who has won everything yet desires nothing, haunted by the cost of righteousness achieved through violence. Yudhishthira's reign is defined by repentance, charity, and relentless self-examination, supported by commanders turned statesmen like Bhima and Arjuna, whose immense strength and skill must now be redirected toward protection rather than destruction, highlighting how warriors struggle to find purpose in peace after a lifetime of war. The women of the Mahabharata, particularly Gandhari and Kunti, emerge as moral forces whose grief and counsel shape the ethical reckoning of the victors, with Gandhari's curse upon Krishna serving as a stark reminder that even divine guidance cannot escape the consequences of manipulation and loss. The surviving commanders and sages, including Vyasa and Krishna, guide the fractured kingdom through rituals of mourning and instruction, emphasizing that knowledge, restraint, and spiritual insight are essential tools of post-war leadership. The Ashvamedha sacrifice conducted by Yudhishthira symbolizes an attempt to reassert order and sovereignty, yet it also underscores the lingering tension between authority and humility, as the Pandavas must confront their own limitations despite their supremacy. The later years of rule gradually give way to renunciation, as the kings and commanders of both epics recognize that temporal power is transient, leading to the final journeys into the forest and the Himalayas, where crowns are abandoned and weapons laid down, and where leadership is redefined as the ability to let go. Part 4 concludes the series by revealing that the Ramayana and the Mahabharata do not glorify power for its own sake, but present kingship and command as temporary trusts bound to moral responsibility, showing that the highest form of leadership lies not in ruling others but in mastering oneself. Leaving behind epics that continue to challenge humanity to question how power is gained, used, and ultimately surrendered. Part 5 of the Ramayana and Mahabharata legendary kings and commanders series serves as a reflective culmination, drawing together the enduring lessons of kingship, command, and human struggle that flow through both epics, revealing that these ancient narratives were never intended merely to recount heroic deeds, but to act as moral mirrors for every generation that engages with them. In the Ramayana, the image of Rama as the ideal king continues to resonate not because he was flawless but Because he consistently placed duty above self, teaching that leadership demands sacrifice even when the reward is misunderstood or delayed, and that the true measure of a ruler lies in the trust of the people rather than personal happiness. While figures like Bharata, who ruled as a region in humility, demonstrate that the highest authority can exist without desire for power. The commanders of the Ramayana, from Hanuman's boundless devotion to Sugriva's restored kingship, illustrate that loyalty rooted in righteousness creates strength greater than any army, and that leadership flourishes when guided by gratitude and shared purpose rather than fear. Turning to the Mahabharata, the legacy of its kings and generals is far more conflicted, yet profoundly human. For the Pandavas and Kauravas together reveal how power magnifies inner nature, turning virtues into burdens and flaws into disasters, with Yudhishthira's lifelong struggle to reconcile truth with survival. Reminding us that moral ideals are often tested in imperfect conditions, and that ruling justly requires constant vigilance against complacency and pride. The great commanders, Bhishma, Drona, Karna, and Arjuna, stand as timeless studies in loyalty, skill, and tragedy, each representing a different answer to the question of whom a warrior truly serves: the throne, the teacher, the friend, or the universal law, and each paying a price for that choice, showing that command without ethical clarity leads to inner defeat even when battlefield victory is achieved. Krishna's role across the epic transcends that of strategist or charioteer, positioning him as the philosophical guide who exposes the illusions of power and permanence, reminding kings and commanders alike that action divorced from awareness binds the soul, while action rooted in understanding leads toward liberation. A message that culminates in the Pandavas' final journey, where renunciation becomes the ultimate act of leadership. As both epics close, the passing of their hero signals not an end but a transition, emphasizing that societies endure while rulers fade, and that the responsibility of leadership is to leave behind order, wisdom, and restraint rather than monuments of conquest. The Ramayana and the Mahabharata thus converge on a shared truth: that war is never truly glorious, power is never permanent, and righteousness is never simple. Yet within these complexities lies a path toward balance, compassion, and self-mastery. Part 5 affirms that the legendary kings and commanders of these epics remain relevant not because of their supernatural feats, but because their dilemmas mirror our own struggles with authority, loyalty, ambition, and conscience, inviting every listener and reader to reflect on how they wield influence in their own lives, and reminding us that the greatest legacy any leader can leave is not dominance, but wisdom shaped by humility and responsibility. Part 6 of the Ramayana and Mahabharata legendary kings and commanders series steps beyond the lives of individual rulers and generals to explore how their actions shape civilization itself, revealing that these epics were designed not only to tell stories of the past, but to educate future societies on governance, warfare, justice, and human restraint, ensuring that the mistakes and wisdom of legendary leaders would never fade into silence. In the Ramayana, the concept of ideal rulership radiates outward from Rama's reign, influencing how later generations understood kingship as a sacred responsibility rather than a privilege, where the king served as the moral axis of society, bound to protect the weak, uphold truth, and sacrifice personal comfort for collective harmony, a model that inspired real-world governance systems across South and Southeast Asia. Embedding the idea that legitimacy flows from righteousness rather than force, the commanders of the Ramayana reinforce this civilizational lesson by demonstrating cooperative leadership where diverse tribes, species, and cultures unite under shared purpose, showing that effective command does not erase differences but aligns them toward common ethical goals, a vision of unity that remains strikingly relevant in fractured modern societies. The Mahabharata, by contrast, presents civilization at its breaking point, using the collapse of the Kuru dynasty as a warning of what happens when power grows faster than wisdom, when political ambition outpaces ethical self-control, and when leaders prioritize victory over reconciliation, turning a prosperous realm into a battlefield of ashes. The kings of the Mahabharata rule not in isolation but within complex institutions of council, alliances, teachers, and kinship networks, illustrating that leadership is never solitary and that responsibility cannot be escaped by blaming fate, elders, or divine will. The commanders, especially Bhishma and Drona, reveal how institutions themselves can become prisons where vows, hierarchies, and traditions trap even the most individuals into sustaining injustice, offering a powerful critique of blind obedience that resonates deeply in any era governed by rigid systems. Karna's life extends this lesson further, exposing the cruelty of social exclusion and the long-term consequences of denying dignity. As his loyalty to Duryodhana emerges not from evil intent, but from gratitude and recognition, reminding us that leadership failures often begin long before wars. In moments where empathy is withheld, across both epics, war is depicted not as an aberration but as a consequence. The final eruption of unresolved ethical decay, showing that battles are symptoms rather than causes, and that true command lies in preventing conflict through justice rather than winning it through strength. The philosophical depth of these narratives elevates kings and commanders into symbols of internal struggle, where every external decision mirrors an inner conflict between fear and courage, attachment and duty, pride and humility, transforming political leadership into a spiritual discipline. This fusion of governance and self-mastery becomes the lasting gift of the epics, teaching that no ruler can govern others without first governing the self, and no commander can lead armies without confronting personal illusion. The survival of the Ramayana and Mahabharata across thousands of years, languages, and cultures testifies to the universality of these lessons, as each retelling adapts the figures of Rama, Yudhishthira, Ravana, Karna, and Arjuna to address the moral crises of its own time, proving that these legendary kings and generals are not frozen in history but continuously reborn through interpretation. Part 6 affirms that the true power of these epics lies not in divine weapons or supernatural feats, but in their relentless examination of authority, reminding us that leadership without accountability breeds ruin, while leadership guided by conscience creates stability even amid suffering. And as modern societies continue to grapple with questions of power, justice, and responsibility, the voices of ancient kings and commanders still speak with unsettling clarity, urging humanity to choose wisdom over domination, restraint over arrogance, and ethical courage over easy victory. Part 7 of the Ramayana and Mahabharata legendary kings and commanders series draws the lens inward, focusing on the psychological and emotional landscapes of leadership revealed through these epics, showing that behind every crown and command stood individuals burdened by fear, doubt, longing, and isolation, and that the greatest battles were often fought within the minds of those entrusted with power. In the Ramayana, Rama's comic exterior conceals a continuous inner struggle to reconcile. Compassion with duty, as each decision he makes as king and commander requires the suppression of personal desire in favor of moral obligation, revealing a form of leadership that demands emotional discipline so completed borders on self-erasure, a theme echoed in Lakshmana, whose fierce loyalty masks a life lived in constant vigilance, suppressing resentment and fatigue to serve a cause larger than himself. Ravana, when viewed through this psychological lens, emerges not merely as a tyrant, but as a ruler consumed by cognitive dissonance, capable of deep devotion and intellectual brilliance, yet unable to confront the destructive consequences of his ego, illustrating how denial becomes the most dangerous enemy of command, blinding leaders to reality until collapse becomes inevitable. Hanuman stands as a counterpoint, his emotional clarity rooted in devotion rather than self-interest, enabling him to act with fearless confidence and resilience, suggesting that leadership anchored in purpose rather than identity produces extraordinary strength. The Mahabharata deepens this exploration by presenting kings and commanders trapped in emotional paradoxes, with Yudhishthira embodying moral anxiety at its extreme, a ruler whose conscience is so acute that it becomes a source of suffering, forcing him to constantly question the legitimacy of his own authority even after victory, and highlighting the psychological cost of ethical leadership in a violent world. Arjuna's famed hesitation on the battlefield exposes the trauma of anticipated violence, making him one of the literary portrayals of combat stress, and his eventual resolve, guided by Krishna, reflects not the elimination of doubt, but the acceptance of action despite it, redefining courage as conscious engagement with fear rather than its absence. Duryodhana's psychology reveals another dimension of kingship, where insecurity and perceived injustice harden into entitlement, transforming wounded pride into destructive ambition. Yet his unwavering loyalty to Karna and his refusal to abandon his allies expose a tragic consistency that complicates any simple moral judgment. Karna's inner world is shaped by lifelong exclusion and unacknowledged identity, producing a commander whose generosity and valor coexist with profound loneliness, and whose tragic end forces the epic to confront how societies create their own enemies by denying recognition and dignity. Bhishma and Drona represent the psychological toll of institutional loyalty, men who suppress personal judgment in obedience to vows and hierarchies, illustrating how prolonged compromise leads to internal fragmentation and silent despair. Part 7 reveals that the Ramayana and the Mahabharata understand leadership not as a state of certainty, but as a condition of perpetual tension, where kings and commanders must navigate conflicting values without assurance of moral clarity or personal peace. These epics thus anticipate modern understandings of leadership stress, ethical burnout, and the emotional isolation of authority, offering timeless insight into why power so often feels heavy even when rightfully held. As this series continues, the legendary rulers and generals stand not as unreachable ideals or villains, but as profoundly human figures whose inner struggles mirror our own, reminding us that the challenge of leadership lies not in commanding others, but in enduring the silent weight of responsibility with awareness, humility, and resilience. Part 8 of the Ramayana and Mahabharata legendary kings and commanders series toward the enduring symbolism and moral architecture of these epics, revealing how each ruler and general functions not only as a historical or mythic figure, but as a living symbol through which complex ideas about power, justice, fate, and human choice are expressed, allowing the narratives to speak across without losing relevance. In the Ramayana, Rama symbolizes the axis of order around which society is meant to revolve, not because he dominates others, but because he consistently subordinates himself to dharma, transforming kingship into a moral compass rather than a throne of privilege, while Sita embodies the land itself, fertile, patient, and vulnerable to the consequences of royal decisions, reminding us that the lives of ordinary people are always shaped by the actions of those in power. Ravana, in symbolic terms, represents the intellect ungoverned by humility, a king whose mastery of knowledge and force becomes destructive when detached from ethical restraint, serving as a cautionary figure for civilizations that elevate brilliance without wisdom. Hanuman emerges as the symbol of aligned strength, where physical power, emotional clarity, and spiritual devotion converge, suggesting that the most effective commanders are those whose inner and outer worlds are harmonized. The Mahabharata expands symbolic complexity even further, presenting the Kuru dynasty as a microcosm of society itself, where competing claims, loyalties, and interpretations of justice collide, and where kingship becomes a contested space rather than a settled ideal. Yudhishthira symbolizes the burden of moral absolutism in a relative world, illustrating how unwavering commitment can paradoxically produce suffering when systems are corrupted, while Bhima embodies raw force restrained by loyalty, a reminder that strength without guidance risks chaos, yet strength guided by ethical bonds can protect justice. Arjuna's symbolism lies in conscious agency, the individual torn between personal attachment and social duty, whose dialogue with Krishna elevates him from a warrior to a seeker, turning the battlefield into a philosophical arena where action and awareness must coexist. Karna symbolizes marginalized excellence, the tragic outcome of a society that judges worth by birth rather than character, showing how unacknowledged talent can be driven into destructive alliances. While Duryodhana represents entitlement born of insecurity, a ruler who believes power is owed rather than earned, yet whose fierce loyalty complicates any simple reading of villainy. Bhishma and Drona symbolize the weight of tradition, figures who uphold order even when it becomes unjust, revealing how institutions can preserve stability at the cost of compassion. Across both epics, fate operates not as blind determinism, but as the cumulative momentum of past actions, showing that destiny is shaped through choice rather than imposed from above, and that kings and commanders alike participate in creating the very outcomes they later call inevitable. Part 8 demonstrates that the Ramayana and Mahabharata endure because their leaders are not static icons but dynamic symbols, capable of carrying new meanings as societies evolve, allowing each generation to reinterpret what it means to rule, to obey, to fight, and to forgive. By engaging with these symbolic layers, we move beyond admiration or condemnation of legendary figures and enter a deeper dialogue with the epics themselves, recognizing that the true power lies in their ability to reflect our own moral uncertainties back to us, urging continuous reflection on how authority is justified, how loyalty is chosen, and how responsibility is ultimately borne by those who dare to lead. Part 9 of the Ramayana and Mahabharata legendary and commanders series delves into the enduring lessons these offer about governance, strategy, and the ethics of command, emphasizing that the actions of kings and generals were never merely martial or ceremonial, but deeply instructive for society seeking to understand the balance between power and responsibility. In the Ramayana, Rama's approach to rulership after his return to Ayodhya exemplifies the integration of moral authority, with administrative demonstrating that a true king must maintain harmony not only through laws and decrees, but through empathy, fairness, and the cultivation of trust, while the generals who served him, from Lakshmana to Angada, illustrate how leadership in subordinate roles requires both initiative and disciplined restraint, the ability to act decisively while remaining aligned with overarching principles, a lesson equally relevant in modern organizational structures. Ravana's downfall, when studied as a case of failed leadership, provides a contrasting lesson. Brilliance, military skill, and intelligence are insufficient when untempered by humility, foresight, and moral grounding, revealing that the greatest threats to kingdoms often arise not from external enemies, but from internal hubris, unchecked ambition, and the neglect of wise counsel. Hanuman's exploits, on the other hand, reinforce the critical importance of loyalty, courage, and moral clarity in command, showing that effective leadership is not only about directing forces, but about embodying principles that inspire obedience and devotion without coercion. The Mahabharata presents a more nuanced and morally intricate study, as the Kuru dynasty's collapse exposes how complex social, familial, and political networks shape the success or failure of kingship. With Yudhishthira's rise to power illustrating that adherence to dharma is both a personal discipline and a social obligation, requiring constant reflection, consultation, and a willingness to bear the emotional weight of consequences, while his brothers Bhima, Arjuna, Nakula, and Sahdeva demonstrate that the execution of command involves both individual skill and collective coordination, each contributing unique strengths to the governance and protection of the realm. Duryodhana's reign and decisions underscore the dangers of entitlement, jealousy, and narrow loyalty, revealing that leadership built on personal vindication, rather than collective good inevitably leads to societal collapse, while the loyalty of Karna exemplifies the ethical complexity of command, showing that steadfastness in support of a flawed cause can be simultaneously admirable and tragic, demanding reflection on the ethical responsibilities of both leaders and their lieutenants. The epics repeatedly demonstrate that victory in battle is inseparable from the quality of strategy, planning, and ethical judgment, as illustrated by Bhishma's meticulous deployment of forces, Drona's instruction of the next generation, and the calculated maneuvers of Arjuna and Krishna, whose combined skills of foresight, moral reasoning, and tactical ingenuity that effective command merges intellect, virtue, and intuition beyond warfare. Both epics emphasize the governance of people, law, and society as the ultimate responsibility of kings, teaching that authority is not simply the ability to impose one's will, but the capacity to sustain justice, reward merit, punish wrongdoing, and nurture the prosperity and moral health of a realm. A principle reinforced by Rama's establishment of Ramraja and Yudhishthira's careful restoration of Hastinapura, both of which highlight that leadership's true measure is enduring stability, ethical consistency, and societal welfare. Part 9 also emphasizes that the Ramayana and Mahabharata encourage reflection on the human limitations of kings and commanders, acknowledging that even the most virtuous leaders are subject to doubt, and the moral weight of unintended consequences, and that the careful study of these epics offers guidance not only for rulers and warriors, but for anyone tasked with responsibility over others. Ultimately, these narratives insist that leadership is a continuous dialogue between action and principle, courage and conscience, skill and justice, and that the legendary kings and commanders endure as both exemplars and cautionary figures, their stories, providing timeless instruction on how power must be wielded wisely, loyalties must be navigated ethically, and decisions must always be measured against the long arc of consequence and the enduring well-being entrusted to one's care. Part 10 of the Ramayana and Mahabharata legendary commanders brings together the threads of heroism, strategy, moral responsibility, and legacy, focusing on how these epic figures continue to illuminate the principles of leadership, the complexity of duty, and the consequences of choices, showing that their stories are as much about human psychology and ethical reflection as they are about warfare or governance. In the Ramayana, Rama's life demonstrates the integration of personal virtue with public duty, revealing that the effectiveness of a king is measured not by conquest alone, but by the consistent application of justice, compassion, and foresight, and that a ruler's greatest power lies in inspiring voluntary rather than enforcing obedience through fear, while his generals, including Lakshmana, Hanuman, Sugriva, and Angada, exemplify complementary leadership qualities, courage, initiative, strategic thinking, and moral clarity, demonstrating that command is exercised most successfully when guided by shared values and clear ethical principles, and that unity and trust among leaders are as decisive as any weapon. Ravana, by contrast, illustrates the perils of intellect and strength untempered by humility and foresight, as his extraordinary knowledge, political acumen, and mastery of warfare are ultimately undone by pride, desire, and ethical blind spots, a cautionary example showing that brilliance alone cannot sustain power, and that failure to consult wise counsel or heed moral constraints inevitably to downfall, emphasizing the critical importance of self-awareness and restraint in leadership. In the Mahabharata, the multiplicity of kings and commanders allows for nuanced examination of leadership under moral ambiguity, with Yudhishthira embodying the challenge of maintaining in the face of personal loss, political pressure, and war's unpredictability, his decisions reflecting the tension between principle and pragmatism, while Bhima and Arjuna demonstrate how skill must be tempered with wisdom, coordination, and ethical consideration, showing that even extraordinary ability can falter without disciplined application. Duryodhana and Karna provide instructive contrast, illustrating how loyalty and valor, when aligned with ambition, resentment, or injustice, can lead to catastrophic consequences, yet also highlighting the nobility and steadfastness that define human courage and commitment, reminding us that ethical evaluation in leadership is rarely straightforward. The epics also explore the psychological demands of command, portraying the inner struggles of warriors who balance desire, loyalty, and conscience, as seen in Arjuna's hesitation, Bhishma's dilemmas over family and duty, Karna's tragic isolation, and Drona's moral compromises, teaching that leadership requires not only strategic skill, but deep emotional intelligence and the capacity to bear the weight of difficult choices beyond the battlefield. Both epics highlight governance, and societal welfare as fundamental responsibilities of kingship, emphasizing that the ultimate purpose is the protection and ethical guidance of the populace, as reflected in Rama's Ramrajya and Yudhishthira's restoration of Hastinapura, showing that sustainable authority is rooted in accountability, and the consistent application of dharma rather than manipulation or self-interest. Part 10 underscores that the lessons of these legendary commanders extend far beyond their historical or mythical settings, offering enduring insights into human behavior, organizational leadership, conflict resolution, and ethical decision-making, and demonstrating that courage, wisdom, loyalty, and moral integrity are as essential to effective command today as they were in the epics. Finally, the series affirms that the Ramayana and Mahabharata endure not only because of their dramatic battles or heroic feats, but because they probe the perennial questions of responsibility, consequence, and human potential, leaving us with the understanding that leadership is an art of balance between strength and compassion, duty and desire, principle and pragmatism, and that the legacy of these legendary generals lies in their demonstration that true greatness arises from aligning action with conscience, ensuring that their stories continue to challenge, and inspire all who seek to lead with wisdom and honor. Part 11 of the Ramayana and Mahabharata legendary commanders explores the broader cultural, and moral impact of these epics, emphasizing that the kings and commanders were not only figures of strategy, but also carriers of enduring lessons on human nature, societal order, and the responsibilities of leadership, revealing how these narratives continue to inform ethical thinking even thousands of years after they were composed. In the Ramayana, Rama's reign exemplifies the integration of personal virtue with public authority, where his every action reflects careful consideration of dharma, illustrating that true kingship requires the alignment of moral integrity with practical governance, while his generals and allies, from Lakshmana to Hanuman, embody complementary leadership qualities such as initiative, loyalty, and selfless service, showing that effective command depends on collaboration and the harmonization of diverse strengths rather than the dominance of a single individual, and that the moral clarity of a leader inspires devotion, unity, and collective purpose, sustaining the stability of both kingdom and army. Ravana's contrasting example highlights the dangers inherent in brilliance from ethical grounding, as his knowledge, strategic acumen, and military prowess cannot prevent downfall when hubris, unchecked desire, and moral blindness dominate his decisions, underscoring a timeless lesson that intelligence and power must always be tempered by foresight, humility, and ethical consideration, and that neglecting these principles can lead even the most capable ruler to catastrophic failure. The Mahabharata presents a far more intricate exploration under moral complexity, with Yudhishthira embodying the struggle to maintain dharma amidst competing loyalties, personal grief, and the demands of rulership, demonstrating that ethical leadership is rarely simple and often requires navigating ambiguity, making choices where every option carries moral and practical consequences, while his brothers Arjuna, Nakula, and Sahdeva illustrate how strength, and courage must be tempered with strategic thought, ethical awareness, and disciplined coordination, emphasizing that leadership is both individual and collective responsibility, where the abilities of generals and the character of rulers intersect to shape out the experiences of Duryodhana and Karna further illuminate the complexities of loyalty and ambition, showing that dedication and valor can be rendered tragic when aligned with injustice or personal grievance, teaching that the moral quality of leadership depends not only on individual courage, but also on the justice of the cause served, and that true command requires constant self-reflection, restraint, and accountability. The epics also explore the psychological and emotional dimensions of leadership, portraying the mental burdens of warriors who must balance fear, attachment, duty, and conscience, as seen in Arjuna's hesitation, Bhishma's moral conflict, Karna's lifelong sense of exclusion, and Drona's compromises, demonstrating that effective leadership requires mastery of strategy and combat, but also of self-regulation, emotional resilience, and the ability to bear the weight of consequential decisions beyond the battlefield. Both epics emphasize the role of kings and commanders in governance, and societal welfare, teaching that power is ultimately justified not through conquest, but through the protection, ethical guidance, and prosperity of the people, as exemplified in Rama's and Yudhishthira's restoration of Hastinapura, illustrating that lasting authority is rooted in fairness, moral consistency, and the creation of a stable social order. Part 11 further emphasizes that the enduring influence of the Ramayana and Mahabharata arises from their capacity to merge narrative, philosophy, and practical instruction, allowing readers and listeners to engage with questions of morality, and leadership across generations, showing that kings and commanders in these epics are not merely historical or mythic figures, but ongoing exemplars, and teachers whose stories challenge us to examine our own decisions, responsibilities, and ethical frameworks. Ultimately, this part of the series affirms that the legacy of legendary kings and generals lies not only in their victories or political power, but in their demonstration of the interplay between wisdom, loyalty, and conscience, offering timeless guidance on how leadership, when exercised with awareness and ethical rigor, can harmonize strength with justice, ambition with responsibility, and authority with compassion, ensuring that these epics remain living texts capable of inspiring reflection, ethical growth, and the pursuit of excellence across all ages. Part 12 of the Ramayana and Mahabharata legendary kings and commanders series examines the enduring interplay between strategy and legacy, highlighting how these epics convey lessons about leadership far beyond the battlefield and the throne, revealing that kingship and command were conceived not as privileges, but as profound responsibilities that shape society and test the human spirit. In the Ramayana exemplifies a model of leadership grounded in dharma, where moral clarity, adherence to duty, and foresight guide every decision, from managing alliances to planning military campaigns, demonstrating that true authority is sustained through righteousness and the ability to inspire loyalty rather than fear, while his generals, including Lakshmana, Hanuman, Sugriva, and illustrate complementary dimensions of strategic thinking, courage, initiative, and unwavering service, showing that effective leadership is inherently collaborative, dependent on trust, coordination, and alignment with overarching ethical principles, and that the collective moral and tactical strength of a group often surpasses the even the greatest individual. Ravana, in stark contrast, demonstrates the perils of brilliance from ethical grounding, as his mastery of warfare, knowledge of celestial and intellectual sophistication are ultimately undone by pride, and disregard for counsel, highlighting timeless warning that intelligence and capability are insufficient when untempered by humility, moral awareness, and the capacity to foresee long-term consequences, and illustrating how leadership failures often originate from character rather than external circumstances. In the Mahabharata, the Kuru dynasty provides a more nuanced canvas for exploring leadership under ethical complexity, as Yudhishthira embodies the tension between principle and pragmatism, striving to uphold dharma, while navigating betrayal, familial conflict, and the moral ambiguities inherent in war, while his brothers, Arjuna, Nakula, and Sahdeva, demonstrate that physical prowess and technical skill must be paired with strategic insight, ethical discernment, and disciplined coordination to achieve sustainable results, underscoring that effective command is both an individual and collective endeavor. The narratives of Duryodhana and Karna illuminate the moral dilemmas and consequences of loyalty, ambition, and exclusion, showing that courage and steadfastness, when aligned with injustice or personal grievance, can yield tragic outcomes, while simultaneously emphasizing the nobility and human dignity inherent in steadfast service, thus prompting reflection on how leaders and commanders must continually assess not only the immediate tactical or political but also the ethical weight of their actions. The epics further explore the psychological demands of leadership, depicting internal struggles of warriors who must reconcile desire, attachment, and conscience, as seen in Arjuna's hesitation before battle, Bhishma's conflicts between duty and affection, Karna's lifelong sense of marginalization, and Drona's moral compromises, illustrating that mastery over the self, emotional resilience, reflection, and ethical consistency is inseparable from mastery over armies and realms. Beyond warfare, both epics emphasize governance, and social order as the ultimate tests of kingship, demonstrating that power is justified not merely by conquest, but by the protection, guidance, and ethical administration of the people, as exemplified in Rama's Ramrajya and Yudhishthira's restoration of Hastinapura, highlighting that the enduring legitimacy of leadership depends on fairness, ethical coherence, and the promotion of societal welfare rather than on domination, coercion, or personal gain. Part 12 also underscores the philosophical resonance of these figures, portraying kings and commanders as embodiments of broader human challenges, duty versus desire, justice versus expediency, loyalty versus conscience, showing that their struggles and decisions serve as ethical mirrors for every generation, offering insight into the exercise of power, the management of responsibility, and the consequences of choices. Ultimately, this part affirms that the enduring significance of the Ramayana and Mahabharata lies not in their mythic battles or extraordinary feats, but in their meticulous depiction of leadership as a moral, strategic, and psychological endeavor, demonstrating that true greatness arises from harmonizing strength with wisdom, courage with conscience, and authority with ethical responsibility, ensuring that these legendary commanders continue to guide, challenge, and inspire all who seek to understand the intricate demands of leadership, governance, and human excellence across time. Part 13 of the Ramayana and Mahabharata legendary kings and commander series explores the transformative power of the long shadow cast by decisions made in moments of strategic crisis, emphasizing that the epics portray kings not simply as heroes but as vessels through which complex lessons about human behavior, governance, and consequence are conveyed, showing that the weight of command is inseparable from ethical and psychological responsibility. In the Ramayana, Rama exemplifies the ideal of righteous authority, balancing the demands of justice, personal devotion, and political stewardship, demonstrating that true kingship is rooted not in domination but in the capacity to inspire confidence, maintain order, and protect the vulnerable, while his generals and allies, including Lakshmana, Hanuma, Sugriva, and Angada, exhibit complementary forms of leadership such as loyalty, strategic insight, and selfless service, illustrating that effective command requires harmonizing individual strengths within a collective framework, where trust, discipline, and alignment with ethical principles amplify the efficacy of action, and where moral clarity becomes a decisive advantage on the battlefield. In contrast, offers a cautionary portrait of intellect and power unmoored from humility, foresight, and ethical grounding, that even the most brilliant and formidable leader can be undone when ambition and pride eclipse reason, and that failure to integrate counsel and decision-making inevitably leads to downfall, highlighting the enduring lesson that leadership demands not only self-awareness and ethical vigilance. The Mahabharata presents an even more intricate exploration of leadership under moral ambiguity, where Yudhishthira embodies the tension between principle and pragmatism, navigating personal grief, political complexity, and the ethical dilemmas of war while striving to uphold dharma, and where his brothers, Arjuna, Nakula, and Sahdeva, demonstrate that strength and courage must be guided by strategy, moral discernment, and coordination, emphasizing that leadership is both individual and collective, requiring the integration of diverse abilities, perspectives, and ethical considerations to achieve sustainable outcomes. Duryodhana and Karna further complicate the moral landscape, showing how loyalty, and social exclusion shape decisions that can be both admirable and tragic, revealing that ethical evaluation of leaders and commanders is rarely straightforward, and that courage and steadfastness may coexist with flawed judgment or misaligned allegiance, prompting reflection on the responsibilities of both those who serve under them. The epics also illuminate the psychological and emotional dimensions of leadership, portraying warriors as human beings, navigating fear, attachment, and conscience, as seen in Arjuna's hesitation before battle, Bhishma's moral conflicts between duty and affection, Karna's lifelong sense of marginalization, and Drona's compromises between loyalty and demonstrating that mastery over emotional resilience, self-reflection, and moral clarity is inseparable from mastery over armies and political decisions beyond warfare. Both epics emphasize governance and societal welfare as the ultimate measure of kingship, illustrating that authority is justified not through conquest alone, but through the protection and ethical administration of the populace, as exemplified in Rama's Ram Raja and Yudhishthira's post-war rule in Hastinapura, showing that legitimacy and enduring influence derive from fairness, ethical consistency, and promotion of the common good rather than fear, or personal ambition. Part 13 further highlights the symbolic and philosophical dimensions of these legendary figures, portraying them as embodiments of perennial human dilemmas, versus desire, justice versus expediency, loyalty versus conscience, demonstrating that the epics serve as mirrors for strategic and psychological reflection across generations, offering guidance on how to navigate the complexities of accountability and consequence. Ultimately, this part affirms that the Ramayana and Mahabharata endure because they depict leadership as integration of strength, wisdom, and ethical responsibility, revealing that true greatness lies not in victory alone, but in the careful alignment of action with conscience, the harmonization of personal ambition with public duty, and the cultivation of character that sustains both authority and justice, ensuring that the lessons of these legendary kings continue to resonate, and instruct those who seek to understand the enduring demands of strategy, and human excellence. Part 14 of the Ramayana and Mahabharata legendary kings delves into the legacy and enduring influence of these epic figures, emphasizing how their actions and moral struggles continue to shape cultural and strategic thought, revealing that kingship and command in these narratives were conceived as tests of character as much as demonstrations of strength or intellect, and that their lessons transcend time, offering guidance on governance, leadership, and human responsibility. In the Ramayana, life exemplifies the principle that true leadership is inseparable from righteousness, illustrating that the legitimacy of the king rests not on conquest or coercion, but on the consistent application of dharma and protection of the vulnerable, while his generals and allies, from Lakshmana to Hanuman and Angada, demonstrate how effective command combines courage, strategic insight, and selfless service, showing collective alignment around ethical purpose magnifies the impact of individual ability, and that moral clarity inspires devotion and enduring strength, both on and off the battlefield. By contrast, serves as a cautionary figure, illustrating that brilliance and power, when untempered by humility, foresight, and ethical grounding, can lead to catastrophic failure, highlighting the importance of self-awareness and restraint in leadership, and reminding awaiting future. Generations that intelligence alone cannot safeguard a kingdom or a legacy without moral vigilance. In the Mahabharata, the Kuru dynasty provides a far more complex study of leadership under ethical ambiguity, where Yudhishthira embodies the tension between principle and pragmatism, attempting to uphold dharma while navigating betrayal and the consequences of war, and where his brothers Arjuna, and Sahdeva illustrate that physical prowess and technical skill must be tempered with strategic foresight, ethical discernment, and collaborative coordination, emphasizing that effective command requires integration of individual strength with collective judgment, and that leadership is as much about moral responsibility as it is about tactical execution. Duryodhana and Karna offer lessons in the tragic consequences of ambition and social exclusion, showing that valor and steadfastness may coexist with flawed judgment or misaligned allegiance. And leaders must continually evaluate not only the immediate tactical or political benefit of their actions, but also their long-term ethical implications, while their experiences encourage reflection on the responsibilities of both rulers and the commanders who serve under them. The epics further explore the psychological and emotional dimensions of leadership, portraying warriors as navigating fear, attachment, desire, and conscience, as seen in Arjuna's hesitation, Bhishma's moral conflicts between family loyalty and duty, Karna's lifelong struggle with marginalization, and Drona's compromises between loyalty and demonstrating that mastery over oneself, emotional resilience, and moral clarity is inseparable from mastery over territories, and political responsibilities. Beyond warfare, the Ramayana and Mahabharata emphasize governance and societal welfare as the ultimate measure of kingship, illustrating that authority is justified not through conquest alone, but through ethical administration, and the promotion of justice and prosperity, as reflected in Rama's Ramrajya's restoration of Hastinapura, highlighting that enduring leadership relies on ethical consistency and the care of one's people rather than coercion or personal ambition. Part 14 also underscores the symbolic and philosophical dimensions of these epic portraying kings and commanders as embodiments of universal dilemmas, duty versus desire, justice versus expediency, loyalty versus conscience, showing that the epics function as moral offering guidance on navigating the complexities of accountability and consequence, and illustrating that the true measure of greatness lies not in victory or power alone, but in the careful alignment of action with conscience, the harmonization of personal ambition with public duty, and the cultivation of character that sustains both authority and justice. This part affirms that the Ramayana and Mahabharata because they portray leadership as an integration of strength, courage, wisdom, and ethical responsibility, providing timeless lessons that inspire reflection, challenge moral and illuminate the enduring demands of governance, strategy, and human excellence, ensuring that the legendary kings and commanders continue to guide, and inspire generations across time. Part 15 of the Ramayana and Mahabharata legendary kings serves as a culminating reflection on the enduring moral and philosophical lessons embedded in demonstrating that the lives of kings and generals were never simply narratives of heroism or intricate studies in ethics, leadership, human nature, and the consequences of choice, showing how these legendary figures continue to shape cultural understanding and inspire reflection, responsibility, and governance. In the Ramayana, embodies the ideal of Dharma exemplifying how moral clarity, self-discipline, and unwavering commitment to justice form the foundation of true illustrating that a king's strength lies not merely in military prowess or political control, but in the consistent application of protection of the innocent, and the ability to inspire trust and loyalty among allies and subjects alike, while his generals, companions, including Lakshmana, Hanuman, Sugrivan, and Sugriva, demonstrate the complementary facets of leadership, strategy, unwavering loyalty, and selfless service, highlighting that the effectiveness of command arises from the alignment of individual talents with a shared ethical vision, and that collective harmony strengthens both armies and governance. In contrast, offers a profound cautionary example of intelligence and skill untempered by humility, foresight, ethical restraint, showing that brilliance and capability alone cannot safeguard power, desire, pride, and disregard for wise counsel dominate decision-making, and that even the most powerful ruler is vulnerable to downfall when moral blindness supersedes judgment. In the Mahabharata, dynasty provides a complex and morally rich exploration of leadership, where Yudhishthira exemplifies the struggle to reconcile principle with maintaining adherence to dharma, facing the consequences of familial conflict, and the horrors of war, and where his brothers, Arjuna, and Satyava, demonstrate that strength and courage must be exercised in coordination with ethical judgment and strategic revealing that effective command is both individual and collective, requiring not only personal excellence but also the ability to harmonize the abilities of others toward a just and sustainable outcome. Karna further complicate this moral landscape, showing how loyalty and exclusion can produce decisions that are simultaneously admirable and emphasizing that leadership involves constant reflection on the ethical and long-term consequences of action, and that the nobility of courage or fidelity may not excuse alignment with unjust causes. The epics also illuminate the psychological and emotional dimensions of leadership, portraying warriors as human beings, navigating fear, attachment, conscience, and moral doubt, as seen in Arjuna's hesitation, Bhishma's conflicts between duty and familial affection, Karna's lifelong marginalization, and Drona's highlighting that mastery of self, emotional resilience, ethical awareness, and disciplined is inseparable from mastery over armies and political decisions. Beyond the battlefield, epic stress governance, and societal welfare as the ultimate measure. Kingship, illustrating that authority is justified not by conquest alone, but through protection, and the promotion of justice and prosperity, as reflected in Rama's Ram Raja's post-war restoration of Hastinapura, emphasizing that enduring legitimacy and the true strength of leadership are rooted in consistency, and the care of the people rather than coercion or personal ambition. Part 15 further underscores the symbolic philosophical dimensions of these legendary figures, portraying them as embodiments of perennial human dilemmas, duty versus desire, justice versus expediency, loyalty versus showing that the epics function as moral and psychological mirrors, offering timeless guidance on navigating the complexities of responsibility, consequence, and consequence. This concluding part affirms that the Ramayana and Mahabharata endure because they portray leadership as an intricate integration of courage, ethical responsibility, and self-mastery, demonstrating that true greatness lies not merely in victory but in the alignment of action with the harmonization of personal ambition with collective duty, and the cultivation of character that sustains authority and societal harmony, ensuring that the legendary kings and commanders of these epics continue to instruct and challenge generations across time and culture. Part 16 of the Ramayana and Mahabharata legendary series explores the profound and enduring influence of these epics on the concepts of leadership and human behavior, demonstrating that the legendary kings and generals were not merely figures of myth or history, but living embodiments of the dilemmas, responsibilities, and moral challenges that define authority, showing that their stories continue to resonate because they address the universal tension between power, duty, and conscience. In the Ramayana, exemplifies the integration of personal discernment, ethical political acumen, illustrating that a ruler's authority is legitimate only when grounded in dharma, the protection of the innocent, and the capacity to inspire loyalty and trust through moral examples, while his generals and allies, including Lakshmana, Sugriva, and Angava, demonstrate the complementary aspects of leadership, initiative, strategy, and selfless devotion, highlighting that effective command relies not solely on individual skill, but on the harmonious coordination of talent and values, and that the unity of ethical principles with decisive action is the foundation of lasting strength both on the battlefield and in governance. Serves as a stark counterexample, showing how intelligence, and military might can be undone by hubris and ethical blindness, emphasizing that even the formidable ruler is vulnerable awareness and humility are absent, and illustrating the critical importance of foresight and restraint in sustaining power and legacy. In the Mahabharata, the intricate web of the Kuru dynasty illustrates the complexities of leadership under moral ambiguity, where Yudhishthira embodies the tension between principle and pragmatism, striving to maintain dharma amidst familial conflict and the devastating consequences of war, while brothers Arjuna, Nakula, and Satyava demonstrate that strength and courage must be exercised in coordination with ethical judgment and strategic foresight, showing that effective command is both individual and that success depends on integrating diverse abilities and principles toward a common purpose. Duryodhana and Karna exemplify the tragic consequences of ambition and exclusion, demonstrating that even admirable qualities such as courage and generosity can produce catastrophe when aligned with unjust causes or personal highlighting that leadership requires continual reflection on the ethical and long-term ramifications of decisions, and that moral clarity is as critical as tactical skill. The epics also explore the psychological and emotional demands of leadership, portraying kings as human beings grappling with fear, attachment, conscience, and moral uncertainty. As Arjuna's hesitation before battle, Bhishma's conflicts between familial loyalty and Karna's lifelong marginalization, and Drona's compromises, illustrating that mastery of self, emotional resilience, ethical awareness, and discipline is inseparable from mastery over armies and political authority beyond the battlefield. Both epics stress the importance of governance and societal welfare as the ultimate measure of kingship, demonstrating that authority justified not through conquest alone, but through the protection, ethical prosperity of the populace, as exemplified in Rama's Ramrajya and Yudhishthira's restoration of Hastinapura, emphasizing that the legitimacy and enduring strength of leadership derive from moral consistency, and service to society rather than coercion or self-interest. Part 16 further highlights the symbolic and philosophical dimensions of these legendary portraying them as embodiments of universal human dilemmas, duty versus desire, justice versus expediency, loyalty versus showing that the epics function as moral and strategic mirrors, timeless guidance on navigating responsibilities of decision-making and consequence. This part affirms that the Ramayana and Mahabharata endure because they portray leadership as a delicate balance of courage, ethical responsibility, and self-mastery, demonstrating that true greatness lies not in conquest or acclaim, but in the harmonization of personal ambition with collective duty, the alignment of action with cultivation of character that sustains both authority and justice, ensuring that the legendary kings and commanders of these epics continue to instruct and challenge generations across time and circumstance. Part 17 of the Ramayana and Mahabharata legendary series delves into the enduring moral and philosophical dimensions of leadership as portrayed in emphasizing that the legendary kings were not merely heroic but exemplars and cautionary figures whose lives reflect the profound responsibilities, ethical human complexities inherent in power and warfare, revealing that the lessons embedded their stories continue to resonate because they speak to universal questions of duty, loyalty, justice, and consequence. In the Ramayana, Rama epitomizes the ideal of demonstrating that the authority of a ruler is legitimized not through personal ambition, but through adherence to righteousness, and the protection of the vulnerable, while his generals and allies, including Lakshmana, Hanuman, and Angada, exemplify complementary facets leadership, strategic insight, initiative, loyalty, and selfless service, highlighting that the effectiveness of command arises from the integration of individual excellence with shared ethical purpose, and that the unity of moral clarity and decisive action strengthens not only armies but the very fabric of society. Ravana provides a striking counterexample, showing how intelligence, military prowess, and political skill can be undone by unchecked desire, and moral blindness, demonstrating that even the most capable and powerful leader when ethical awareness and humility are absent, and reinforcing the principle that sustainable leadership requires foresight, consultation, and The Mahabharata presents a far more complex exploration of leadership under moral and strategic ambiguity, where Yudhishthira embodies the struggle to maintain dharma while navigating familial political betrayal, and the devastating consequences of war, where his brothers, Arjuna, and Satyava, demonstrate that physical strength and bravery must be exercised in coordination with ethical judgment, strategic foresight, and collective discipline, showing that effective command is simultaneously and collaborative responsibility, reliant on harmonizing diverse perspectives toward a coherent and just objective. Duryodhana and Karna further illustrate the tragic consequences of ambition and social exclusion, highlighting that virtues such as courage, and generosity can lead to catastrophe when aligned with injustice or personal emphasizing that ethical discernment and long-term reflection are essential components of leadership, and that failure to consider the broader implications of action can negate even the most formidable talents. The epics also examine the psychological and emotional dimensions of command, portraying kings as human warriors, grappling with fear, attachment, conscience, and moral uncertainty, as seen in Arjuna's hesitation on the battlefield, Bhishma's dilemmas between familial loyalty, Karna's lifelong struggle with marginalization, and Drona's compromises between allegiance and ethics, demonstrating that mastery over emotional resilience, moral clarity, and discipline reflection is inseparable from mastery over armies, and political responsibilities beyond warfare. Ramayana and Mahabharata stress that the ultimate measure of kingship lies in governance, and the welfare of the populace, showing that power is justified not by conquest alone, but by the ethical protection and prosperity of the people, as exemplified in Rama's Ramrajya and Yudhishthira's restoration of illustrating that lasting legitimacy and authority derive from fairness, and service rather than coercion or self-interest. Part 17 emphasizes the symbolic and philosophical layers of these legendary figures, portraying them as embodiments of universal human dilemmas, duty versus desire, justice versus expediency, loyalty versus demonstrating that the epics function as moral and psychological mirrors, offering enduring guidance for navigating the complexities of leadership, responsibility, and consequence. This part affirms that the Ramayana and Mahabharata endure because they portray leadership as a multidimensional synthesis of courage, ethical responsibility, and self-mastery, showing that true greatness lies not in victory but in harmonizing personal ambition with collective duty, aligning action with conscience, and cultivating character that sustains authority and societal harmony, ensuring that the legendary kings and commanders of these epics continue to instruct and challenge generations across time, and circumstance. Part 18 of the Ramayana and Mahabharata legendary kings delves deeper into the synthesis of ethical and personal dimensions of leadership portrayed emphasizing that the legendary kings and generals were not simply figures of martial valor or political embodiments of the moral, psychological, and societal challenges that define the exercise of power, demonstrating that their decisions and failures offer timeless lessons on governance, responsibility, and human conduct. Rama exemplifies the ideal of dharmic showing that the legitimacy of a ruler depends on the consistent application of virtue, the protection of the vulnerable, and the ability to inspire loyalty and trust rather than coercion, while his generals and allies, from Lakshmana to Hanuman, and Angada, represent complementary dimensions of leadership, strategic initiative, and unwavering devotion, highlighting that the success of command is rooted in the integration of individual strengths within a collective ethical vision, where alignment of purpose, and moral clarity magnifies both military and administrative effectiveness. In stark contrast, demonstrates the hazards of intellect, and ambition untempered by ethical foresight, illustrating that pride, and neglect of counsel can render even the most formidable leader vulnerable vulnerable to downfall, reinforcing the principle that power without conscience is inherently unstable. The Mahabharata presents an intricate and morally nuanced study of leadership, embodying the tension between principle and pragmatism, striving to uphold navigating the complexities of familial loyalty, and the consequences of war, and with his brothers, Arjuna, and Sahadeva, showing that strength, skill, valor must be exercised in conjunction with ethical coordination, strategic disciplined collaboration, emphasizing that effective leadership is both an individual and collective responsibility, dependent on harmonizing diverse abilities and moral principles toward a just and sustainable outcome. The narratives of Duryodhana and Karna illustrate the tragic consequences that arise when ambition and social exclusion intersect, showing that qualities such as steadfastness and generosity may be rendered destructive when aligned with injustice or personal highlighting the necessity for leaders to continually evaluate the ethical and long-term implications of their decisions. These epics also explore the psychological and emotional demands of leadership, portraying kings as human beings navigating fear, desire, conscience, and moral uncertainty, as exemplified by Arjuna's battlefield hesitation, Bhishma's conflicts between duty and familial affection, Karna's lifelong marginalization, and Drona's compromises between allegiance and ethics, illustrating that mastery of self, emotional resilience, ethical disciplined reflection is inseparable from mastery over armies and political authority. Beyond the battlefield, the Ramayana and Mahabharata stress governance, and societal welfare as the ultimate measures of kingship, showing that power is justified solely through conquest, but through ethical protection and promotion of prosperity as reflected in Rama's Ramrajya and Yudhishthira's post-war restoration of demonstrating that the legitimacy and enduring strength of leadership arise from fairness and dedication to the common good rather than coercion, or personal ambition. Also underscores the symbolic and philosophical dimensions of these legendary figures, portraying them as embodiments of perennial human dilemmas, duty versus expediency, loyalty versus conscience, revealing that the epics function as moral and psychological mirrors, offering enduring guidance on navigating the challenges of leadership, responsibility, and consequence. This part affirms that the Ramayana and Mahabharata endure because they depict leadership as a dynamic integration of courage, ethical responsibility, and self-mastery. That true greatness lies not in conquest or acclaim, but in harmonizing personal ambition with collective action with conscience, and cultivating character that sustains authority, and societal harmony, ensuring that the legendary kings and commanders of these epics continue to instruct and challenge generations across time, culture, and circumstance. Part 19 of the Ramayana and Mahabharata legendary kings examines the enduring synthesis of moral and psychological dimensions that define leadership within emphasizing that the legendary kings and generals were not merely heroic figures or symbols of military might, but exemplars and cautionary complexities of governance, duty, and human conduct are explored, revealing that their actions, and failures, triumphs, and continue to offer timeless guidance for understanding responsibility and the consequences of choice. In the Ramayana, Rama represents the ideal of showing that a ruler's legitimacy arises not from coercion or from the consistent application of virtue, protection of the vulnerable, and the capacity to inspire loyalty and moral alignment among subjects and allies, while his generals and companions, including Lakshmana, Sugrava, and Engatha, demonstrate complementary aspects of leadership such as courage, strategic insight, and unwavering devotion, illustrating that the strength of command lies not only in individual talent, but in the harmonization of coordinated effort, coordinated trust, and that moral clarity and unity of vision are as decisive in sustaining authority as martial prowess or political skill. As a counterexample, demonstrates how intellectual, military mastery, and political acumen can be undone by pride, desire, and welcome back to my channel, emphasizing that the absence of humility into the timeless world of ethical restraint renders even the most powerful leader and commanders of the Ramayana and the Mahabharata, two vast oceans of history, depends upon conscience, philosophy, counsel, and human emotion that have shaped the cultural soul of the subcontinent. Dynasty presents a more complex stories that are not merely tales of gods and heroes, but deep reflections on duty, power, between principle and pragmatism, and the eternal struggle between dharma amidst righteousness and ambition, political betrayal, and the devastating realities where destiny was forged, and with his brothers, royal courts where moral dilemmas decided the fate of nations, and forests where exile transformed princes into legends, must be exercised the lives of iconic rulers like Rama, the ideal disciplined collaboration, the benchmark of justice and government is both an individual and collective responsibility, ruled not requiring the integration of diverse talents, while also examining the towering presence of perspectives toward warrior kings such as Ravana, and sustainable outcomes, an emperor whose brilliance was rivaled only by his the tragic consequences of ambition, a tragic monarch driven by envy, yet unwavering loyalty such as courage, alongside these rulers, and generosity may lead to catastrophe when aligned with injustice and personal grievance, the tide of history, underscoring the necessity for leaders to continually evaluate the ethical and long-term implications of their decisions, to Bhishma, and that moral clarity is as essential as tactical ability, whose mastery of warfare made. Explore the psychological and emotional demands of leadership, the tireless guardian who fought not for glory but for love and duty, navigating Karna, fear, the tragic sun-born warrior whose unmatched generosity and battlefield skill as seen in Arjuna's hesitation of fate. Bhishma's internal conflicts not about choosing duty and family gods and demons, Karna's lifelong struggle with marginalization, but about understanding the human compromises behind allegiance and ethics, illustrating that mastery of self, and the lessons hidden resilience, divine weapons and celestial boons, and disciplined decision-making. Because every king we discuss ruled not only from mastery over but also their own inner conflicts and political authority. Every commander fought not just enemies but Ramayana and Mahabharata emphasize how leadership was defined in ancient and societal times, welfare as the ultimate measure measured not by conquest alone, authority but by justified not through conquest how commanders alone, balance strategy protection, with honor, guidance, how loyalty and the promotion of prosperity for the people, and how even the mightiest warriors were bound by consequences of their post-war restoration of Hastinapura, storytelling, emphasizing historical context, legitimacy, and thoughtful interpretation. Strength of leadership arises from ancient figures to life, allowing us to see them not as distant goods rather than coercion, but as living characters whose struggles mirror our own questions about further highlights the symbolic and philosophical dimensions of these legendary figures, as we portraying them as embodiments of universal human dilemmas, legendary duels that shook the heavens, justice councils where a single word changed history, and moments of silence demonstrating that the epic's function as mattered more than any weapon, and psychological why the Ramayana and the Mahabharata have endured across the complexities of responsibility, decision-making, and consequence. So if you love epic history, that the Ramayana and Mahabharata endure because they depict the challenge the mind as much as they thrill the imagination. Make sure you stay with me on this journey, because this is not just a series about ancient greatness lies not in conquest or acclaim, this is a journey into the heart of civilization personal ambition with collective duty. Legends were aligning action with conscience, and cultivating character that sustains still resonate in our world today and society. Part 1 of the Ramayana and Mahabharata legendary kings and commanders series begins at the dawn of an age when rulership was inseparable from generations across time and warfare culture was bound by sacred codes. Part 20 of the Ramayana and Mahabharata legendary kings and commanders of cosmic serves as a comprehensive reflection on the both strategy and honor, shaping destinies and leadership that defines these epics. In the Ramayana, that the legendary of kingship finds its purest expression in Rama heroic action or military prowess, King Dashratha embodiments of the complex ethical, prince whose life became a continuous social challenges inherent in governance, to rule, duty, Rama accepted exile revealing that their decisions, placing duty above desire and setting a standard of leadership timeless lessons on responsibility, justice, compassion, and human qualities that transformed him from a royal heir exemplifies the ideal of the righteous king, demonstrating that the legitimacy of a ruler rests not on coercion or personal ambition, but on unwavering adherence to became unbreakable protection of the innocent, shattered his ability to inspire loyalty and alignment through moral clarity, by their words more tightly than by chains. Including Rama stands Ravana, Hanuman, the mighty emperor of Lanka, and Angada, a king general whose complementary aspects of leadership and mastery of warfare made him one of the most formidable initiative and selfless devotion, yet whose unchecked pride and desire of command arises not solely from illustrating how brilliance without the integration of purpose, strength into discipline, Ravana's court was not a realm of chaos, moral consistency but of collective coordination, strength and military excellence, and governance commanded by generals and warriors who fought with fierce loyalty, highlights the reminding us that even those labeled villains, skill untempered by humility, foresight, and ethical awareness. Alongside these kings rose commanders whose actions shaped the course of the war. Council, most notably even the most formidable Vanera general, reinforcing the principle that sustainable leadership demands conscience. For Hanuman fought not for territory or reward, the Mahabharata provides an even more nuanced exploration of leadership under battles against demonic armies, where Yudhishthira embodies the struggle to reconcile principle with pragmatism. The Ramayana upholding dharma, leadership emerges as a balance between authority and restraint, and the devastating consequences of war, and where his brother Mahabharata, where the scale widens and the moral landscape becomes far more complex and conflicted. Skill, the Mahabharata must be exercised in coordination with ethical judgment, strategic foresight, lay the foundation for a war that would engulf, emphasizing that effective leadership is simultaneously and it is here that Bhishma rises as both kingmaker and dependent on harmonizing diverse talents, by a terrible vow of celibacy and loyalty toward just and sustainable unmatched prowess on the battlefield was rivaled only by the tragic consequences of prevent injustice within the royal and social marginalization. Bhishma's leadership that qualities such as courage, the conflict between loyalty and generosity may become destructive when aligned with injustice that lies at the heart of the Mahabharata, underlining that leaders must continually consider the ethical, princes raised together yet divided by consequences of their choices, inherited not only a kingdom but a legacy of psychological and emotional dimensions of leadership, portraying as a king driven by resentment and fear of loss, navigating yet possessing undeniable courage and devotion to his allies, and moral uncertainty, standing as his Arjuna's hesitation, a ruler whose commitment to truth and dharma often familial loyalty and political advantage. Karna's lifelong sense of exclusion, royal landscape, Androna's compromise of extraordinary skill, ethics, men, illustrating like that Drona, mastery of the master strategist and teacher whose knowledge of warfare was absolute, and discipline, yet whose personal attachments led him to choices that blurred the line between justice and loyalty, political authority. And Karna, beyond the sunborn warrior whose life as a commander was defined by generosity, governance, honor, law, and tragedy, and the welfare of the populace are the ultimate measures of unmatched valor, showing that authority by the knowledge of a destiny justified not through conquest alone, but through one of the series lays the foundation for understanding how justice and prosperity and command were perceived in these as exemplified not as simple roles of dominance but as sacred restoration of with ethical consequences, highlighting that the true every decision of leadership derives from fairness, on the battlefield, consistency, karmic weight, and dedication to the common good rather than coercion, how these rulers and generals shaped wars that were not merely contests of weapons the symbolic and philosophical significance of these legendary conflicts that would redefine dharma them as embodiments of perennial human dilemmas, hauntingly relevant desire, justice versus expediency. Part 2 of the Ramayana and Mahabharata, demonstrating that the epic commanders series moves deeper into the heart of epic psychological mirrors, where the ideals offering guidance on navigating the complexities of leadership, war, responsibility, betrayal, and irreversible choices. This concluding that greatness in these ancient narratives is never pure triumph, because they portray leadership as a multidimensional integration. The forest exile of Rama transforms from a personal trial into a crucible of command, showing that true greatness lies not in conquest or dharma but in harmonizing personal ambition, gathering allies not through conquest but through conscience, forging bonds cultivating character that sustains authority, justice, whose own societal harmony restored not by divine right but by Rama's commanders of justice and loyalty, continue to instruct, demonstrating a model of intervention and challenge generations across time, wrongs rather than exploit circumstance. Rama's command style is quiet of the Ramayana and Mahabharata legendary even in moments of overwhelming examines the enduring interplay of morality, strategy, when set against Ravana's militarized empire, emphasizing that the legendary kings and generals were never simply figures such as prowess or political authority, embodied tactical genius and ruthless psychological, mastering social challenges inherent battlefield deception, governance, showing how superior strategy showing that technological might can challenge even decisions continue to provide profound. The clash between Rama and Ravana thus becomes more than a battle between the cultivation of character. It is a collision between two philosophies. Rama exemplifies the archetype of grounded in dharma and demonstrating that the legitimacy of dominance rests on unwavering commitment, and it is through their generals that these philosophies are protection of the innocent, figures like ability to inspire loyalty and moral alignment, engineering skill and battlefield coordination make the impossible possible. Hanuman, such as the construction of the bridge to Lanka, exhibit complementary forms of leadership in the Ramayana is also strategic intelligence, logistics, initiative, and unity across diverse forces, highlighting the narrative effectiveness of command arises not from individual ability of kingship but from the integration of ethical purpose are trapped within webs of kinship and political obligation that make moral clarity and unified vision are as decisive as physical strength or political skill. A king who governs through conscience rather than intimidation, represents the consequences of power, intelligence, his commanders and skill untempered by humility, warriors like Arjuna and Bhishma to balance obedience showing that pride, desire, Arjuna, and neglect as of counsel can lead even the most capable and formidable ruler of duty-bound leadership, emphasizing that sustainable leadership requires self-reflection, hesitation on the battlefield exposes the psychological cost of provides a more intricate exploration of leadership under moral and strategic ambiguity, where Yudhishthira embodies the struggle to reconcile principle becomes a tool of military striving to uphold dharma while navigating familial conflict, political intrigue, and the tragic realities of war, particularly Karna, whose appointment as Bhima, Arjuna, King underscores how leadership in the Mahabharata often defies social hierarchy and physical strength must be exercised in concert with ethical judgment, strategic foresight, counsel, and disciplined collaboration, showing that leadership is both an individual and collective responsibility, vast stage dependent on the harmonization and Bhishma dictate the rhythm of principles, each day defined by coherence, counterformation, and sustainable strategic sacrifices, the experiences illustrating a level of military organization that rivals any ambition, loyalty, and social marginalization, erosion revealing that even admirable qualities such as courage and vows are broken in the pursuit of victory may become destructive when a commander grows increasingly tragic, for despite his honor and generosity, he is forced into decisions that contradict his own values of their decisions, revealing how loyalty to an unjust cause can destroy even the noblest warrior. The epics also underscores the psychological and emotional dimensions of command, portraying kings as shaped and reshaped as human beings by circumstance, navigating their virtues sharpened or corrupted by pressure, conscience, and their legacies defined as much by their failures as by their triumphs. Hesitation. As the wars escalate and choices between familial loyalty and righteousness and Karna's lifelong sense of exclusion, preparing the ground for the final acts where the cost of leadership will be paid in full, illustrating and where the true meaning of victory will be questioned by survivors standing amid the ruins of kingdoms they fought to rule, is inseparable from Ramayana and Mahabharata legendary kings and political authorities arrives at the decisive moment. The Ramayana and Mahabharata defined by intention or philosophy, but by irreversible actions as the ultimate measure of kingship must confront the full weight of their past choices and accept outcomes that cannot be undone, revealing that in these epics promotion of prosperity for the people, as reflected in Rama's Ramayana and Yudhishthira's post-war restoration climactic phase, as Rama's alliance that enduring legitimacy into the heart of Ravana's empire from fairness. It is here that command becomes a test of endurance to society rather than coercion, with generals like Lakshmana stepping fully into independent leadership. 21 also highlights the symbolic and philosophical significance of these legendary figures, in his duel with portraying them as embodiments of universal human dilemmas, unwavering focus overcome illusion, justice versus expediency, symbolizing how clarity of purpose can pierce even the most sophisticated defenses, strategic, fall and psychological terrors, offering timeless guidance for navigating the challenges of responsibility, exposing the vulnerability of a kingdom built around singular brilliance. This part affirms that the Ramayana and Mahabharata endure because they depict king and commander as a multidimensional integration of courage, sovereign and soldier, ethical responsibility, Rama not merely as an enemy, but as showing that true greatness lies not in conquest or renown, but in harmonizing and personal ambition with not as a triumph of force, but as the restoration of cosmic balance, cultivating character that sustains us to dharma guiding even his killing blow, harmony, followed by ensuring that the legendary kings and commanders of these epics continue to construct and inspire and challenge generations, reminding us that just leadership still demands painful sacrifice. The aftermath of Lanka's the Ramayana and Mahabharata legendary kings and Vibhishana series explores the enduring guidance, strategic, illustrating how philosophical lessons embedded in these epics, to rebuild emphasizing that the legendary kings and generals were not merely figures of heroism or military skill, but complex embodiments of ethical, its most psychological, and morally societal responsibilities, where commanders operate under relentless pressure and ethical failures continue to provide timeless insight into leadership, duty, a moment that shatters the illusion of invincibility surrounding the Rama exemplifies the ideal of strategic manipulation rather than direct combat forces both sides to confront the uncomfortable truth through adherence to often demands compromise of the vulnerable, and the ability to inspire loyalty and moral calculating among subjects and allies, where emotional vulnerability becomes a weapon, including his eventual death, driven by deception surrounding his son. demonstrate complementary aspects of leadership such as courage, initiative, strategic intelligence, leaving behind a battlefield victory stained with highlighting that effective command Karna's ascension as supreme commander represents the final integration of ethical resistance from the collective coordination, and under his disciplined execution, showing that moral clarity and direct confrontation are as decisive in sustaining power as military or political promises. Ravana accumulated injustice converged to ensure that his unmatched valor cannot alter the outcome, culminating in his duel with Arjuna, foresight, skill meets destiny and loyalty lead to irreversible consequence, demonstrating that even Karna's fall is not portrayed as a simple defeat, but as the extinguishing of a life shaped by denial and reinforcing the principle that sustainable leadership requires to reckon with the cost of their vigilance and restraint. The final command of Mahabharata presents a more complex and morally nuanced exploration of leadership, stripping kingship down to its barest embodies the tension between principle and pragmatism, grief replace strategy and ambition, dharma, while navigating eventual coronation, political intrigue, and the catastrophic consequences of violence, and where his re-emphasizes that in both the Ramayana and the Mahabharata, the end of war does not restore innocence, skill, kings and commanders exercised in coordination with ethical judgment, strategic foresight, and disciplined teamwork, and victory is shown not as an effective leadership, but as a moment of reckoning, individual and collective responsibility dependent on harmonizing diverse abilities, responsibility, principles, and the shattered perspective left toward coherent, setting the stage for reflections on renunciation, the experiences of Duryodhana and Karna underscore the tragic consequences of ambition, loyalty, Part 4 of the Ramayana and Mahabharata legendary kings and commanders such as turns away from the clash of weapons and generosity may produce devastation when aligned with injustice or personal grievance, not on the battlefield, but leaders must continuously evaluate the ethical and long-term implications of their decisions, revealing that the greatest trials of kings and commanders often begin only after the war has ended. The epics further explore the psychological and emotional dimensions of leadership, portraying kings and warriors also exposes the burden of being an ideal king in an imperfect world. Desire, for Rama must now balance personal emotion with public duty, exemplified by Arjuna's hesitation before battle, demands absolute accountability to the duty and familial loyalty, Karna's lifelong sense of marginalization, most painful expression in the trials faced by Sita and ethics, reminding us that leadership guided by dharma can still produce tragedy when societal expectation, discipline, compassion is inseparable from mastery over armies, realms, becomes less a tale of conquest and more a model of governance rooted in justice, restraint, and welfare, governance, where commanders are no longer warriors but administrators, ultimate guardians of peace, showing that power is justified and not merely like Lakshmana transition from battlefield generals to pillars and the promotion of prosperity for the people, true command as reflected in Rama's Ram Rajya, the elevation of Vibhishana in Lanka further reinforces this ideal, illustrating that the Rama ensures that former strength of leadership arise rather than fairness, moral consistency, emphasizing reconciliation over good rather than demonstrating that sustainable rule depends on legitimacy and moral also emphasizes the symbolic and philosophical significance of these legendary figures, the aftermath portraying them as embodiments of universal human dilemmas, land duty versus desire, justice versus expediency, ascending the throne of Hastinapura burdened by guilt, so profound that kingship itself feels like a curse, and psychological mirrors, delivers its most powerful navigating the challenges of responsibility, showing a ruler who has won everything ethical yet desires nothing, ultimately haunted by the cost of righteousness that the Ramayana and Mahabharata Yudhishthira's reign is defined by leadership as a multidimensional relentless self-examination, wisdom supported by commanders turned statesmen like Bhishma and Arjuna, showing that true greatness lies not in conquest or renown, but in harmonizing personal ambition with highlighting how warriors struggle to find purpose and peace after a lifetime of war that sustains authority, justice, and societal harmony, ensuring that the legendary kings and commanders of these epics continue to ethical reckoning of the victors, and challenge generations across Krishna serving as a stark reminder that even divine guidance cannot escape the consequences of manipulation and legendary kings. The surviving commanders and explores the culmination of Vyasa and Krishna, and philosophical insights embedded within these epics, and instruction, highlighting that the legendary kings and generals were far more than figures of martial essential tools of authority. They embodied the intricate challenges of sacrifice conducted by Yudhishthira symbolizes an attempt to reassert order through their triumphs, yet it also underscores the lingering tension between responsibility and humility, justice, as the Pandavas must confront their own limitations that remain relevant across centuries, In the later years of rule, Rama exemplifies the archetype of dharmic kingship, as the kings and commanders of both epics recognize established not by coercion or conquest, leading to the final journeys into the forest and the Himalayas, protection of the vulnerable, and the ability to inspire loyalty, devotion, where leadership is redefined as the ability to let subjects, while his generals and companions, by revealing that the Ramayana and the Mahabharata do not glorify power for its own sake, but present kingship and command facets of leadership such as courage, moral strategic insight, showing that the highest form of leadership lies not illustrating that the effectiveness of command arises not from individual talent alone, but from the integration of ethical purpose, coordinated action, and disciplined execution, demonstrating that moral clarity and unity of vision are legendary to leadership commanders series serves as a reflective culmination, drawing together provides the enduring lessons of kingship, showing how intelligence, human struggle that flow and military prowess untempered, revealing that these ancient narratives were never intended and ethical to recount inevitably lead to downfall, act as moral emphasizing that every generation that engages excessive pride in the Ramayana, and the neglect of counsel, the image of Rama as the ideal king continues to resonate not because he was flawless, but the principle that sustainable leadership requires self-awareness, teaching that leadership demands sacrifice even when the reward presents a more intricate and morally complex depiction of leadership lies in the trust of the people rather than struggle to reconcile principles like pragmatism, who ruled as striving to uphold dharma while confronting demonstrate that the highest authority can exist without and the devastating consequences of commanders of the Ramayana, brothers, from Hanuman's boundless devotion to Sugrava's restored kinship, demonstrate that loyalty rooted in righteousness and skill must be exercised in alignment with ethical judgment, flourishes when guided by gratitude and disciplined collaboration rather than fear, highlighting that effective leadership is both a legacy of its kings and generals is far more reliant on the harmonization of diverse talents. Pandavas and Kauravas together reveal how power magnifies to achieve just and sustainable virtues into burdens and flaws into disasters, further illustrate the tragic lifelong struggle to reconcile truth with survival, and social exclusion, reminding us that moral ideals are often tested in imperfect conditions, steadfastness, and that generosity requires constant vigilance against complacency and pride. Personal grievance, commanders, underscoring the necessity for leaders to continuously reflect upon the ethical and long-term consequences of their decisions and tragedy, and that moral representing a different answer to the question of tactical or political acumen. The epics also examine the psychological and emotional dimensions of leadership, paying a price for that choice, and showing that command without navigating fear leads to inner desire even when battlefield victory is achieved. Krishna's exemplified by Arjuna's battlefield strategist or Bhishma's conflict, positioning him as the philosophical guide who exposes the illusions of power and permanence, and Drona's compromises and commanders alike that action divorced demonstrating that mastery of self, while emotional resilience understanding leads toward liberation, a message that culminates in the Pandavas' final mastery over renunciation becomes the political authority. Beyond warfare, as both the Ramayana and Mahabharata underscore that governance not an end but a transition, and the welfare of the populace are the ultimate tests of kingship fade, showing that the responsibility is justified not merely by conquest but through ethical protection, restraint rather than monuments and the promotion of prosperity. The Ramayana and the Mahabharata in Rama's Ram Rajya and Yudhishthira's post-war restoration of Hastinapura, power is never emphasizing that enduring legitimacy and the strength of leadership derived from fairness lies a path toward consistency and dedication to the common good rather than coercion. Part 5 affirms that the legendary kings and commanders of these epics further highlights the not because of their philosophical significance of these legendary dilemmas mirror our own struggles as embodiments of universal human dilemmas and conscience versus desire, inviting every listener and reader to reflect on how they loyalty versus conscience in their own lives, showing that the epics function as the greatest legacy any leader can leave is not dominance, but wisdom timeless guidance on navigating the challenges of responsibility, of the Ramayana and Mahabharata legendary kings and commanders. This part affirms that beyond the lives of individual rulers and generals because they depict how their actions shape civilization integration of courage, revealing that these epics were designed not only to tell stories of the past, but illustrating that future societies lies not in conquest or renown, but in harmonizing personal ambition, ensuring that the mistakes and wisdom of legendary leaders would never fade into character that sustains. In the Ramayana, the concept of ideal rulership and societal radiates outward, ensuring that the legendary kings and commanders later generations continue to kingship as a sacred responsibility and challenge generations across time, where the king served as the moral axis of society. Part 24 of the Ramayana and Mahabharata legendary kings and commanders series explores the profound culmination of moral, real-world governance systems and philosophical themes that run throughout these epics, embedding the idea that the legendary kings from righteousness were not merely figures of military skill or Ramayana reinforced but complex embodiments of the ethical lesson by demonstrating cooperative and societal challenges inherent in leadership, species, governance, and cultures unite under shared showing that their triumphs, showing that effective command and does not erase differences but aligns them toward common ethical goals, justice, a vision of unity, and the cultivation of character that remain relevant across generations. In the Ramayana, Rama exemplifies the ideal of civilization at its breaking demonstrating that the legitimacy of a ruler is derived not as a warning of what happens when power grows faster than ambition, but from steadfast ambition to outpaces ethical self-control, and when the ability to inspire loyalty over reconciliation and moral alignment among allies into a battlefield of ashes. While his generals and kings of the Mahabharata rule not in isolation but within complex institutions of councils, embody complementary qualities of leadership such as courage, illustrating that leadership is never solitary and that responsibility cannot be escaped by the effectiveness of command arises from the integration of personal excellence with ethical purpose, and Drona, discipline, coordination, institutions themselves can become moral clarity and vision are as decisive in sustaining authority as even the most honorable individuals into sustaining injustice. Ravana, offering a powerful critique of blind obedience that resonates deeply in any era governed by rigid intelligence divorced from humility extends this lesson further and ethical exposing the cruelty of social that even the most powerful and capable ruler is vulnerable when moral judgment is compromised, and emphasizing not from sustainable leadership gratitude and recognition, ethical vigilance, and restraint. That leadership failures often presents a more complex and morally nuanced study of leadership across both epics. Embodies the tension not as an aberration but as a consequence, seeking to uphold the eruption of unresolved navigating familial showing conflict, that battles are symptoms rather than causes, and the devastating consequences of lies in preventing conflict through justice rather than winning it through strength. And philosophical depth of these narratives elevates kings and commanders into symbols of internal struggle in alignment with ethical judgment, every external decision mirrors an inner conflict discipline, collaboration, courage, emphasizing that effective leadership is both an individual transforming political leadership into a dependent on harmonizing diverse abilities of governance and self-mastery becomes the lasting gift of the epics, teaching that no ruler can govern others without first governing the self, illustrate no commander can lead armies without confronting personal and social exclusion. The survival of the Ramayana and Mahabharata across thousands of years, steadfastness, and generosity can contribute to the universality of injustice or personal grievance, retelling adapts underscoring the necessity for leaders to continually reflect on the ethical and Arjuna to address the moral crises of its own time, and that moral discernment is as crucial as tactical or political skill in history but continuously also examine the psychological and emotional dimensions of leadership, portraying kings lies not in divine as human beings grappling with fear, but in their relentless examination of authority, and reminding us that leadership, as seen in Arjuna's accountability, breeds Bhishma's conflicts, while leadership guided by conscience creates stability, Karna's even amid sense of marginalization, and as modern societies continue to grapple with questions of power, ethics, justice, illustrating that mastery of self, the voices of these ancient kings and commanders still speak with unsettling clarity, urging humanity to choose mastery over domination, territory over arrogance, and political authority, ethical courage beyond the battlefield. The Ramayana and Mahabharata stress Mahabharata legendary kings and the welfare of the populace as the ultimate measures of kingship, on the psychological and emotional justified not merely through conquest but through ethical protection behind every crown and the promotion of prosperity burdened by fear, as exemplified in Rama's Ram Raja and Yudhishthira's post-battle restoration of fought within the minds of those entrusted with the legitimacy in the Ramayana. Enduring Rama's calm exterior conceals a continuous inner struggle to reconcile, and dedication to the common good rather than coercion he makes as king and commander requires the suppression of personal desire in symbolic and philosophical significance revealing of these legendary leadership that demands emotional discipline so complete universal human dilemmas, duty versus desire, justice versus expediency, loyalty masks a life lived in constant vigilance, demonstrating suppressing epic's function as moral, to serve a cause larger than psychological mirrors. Ravana, offering timeless psychological lens, on navigating the complexities of responsibility, but as a ruler consumed by cognitive dissonance, capable of deep devotion and intellectual brilliance yet unable to confront the destructive consequences of his ego, illustrating how denial becomes the most dangerous enemy of command, self-mastery, blinding leaders to reality until collapse becomes inevitable. Renown, Hanuman stands as a counterambition with collective emotional clarity, aligning action with conscience and cultivating enabling him to sustains authority, confidence, and resilience, suggesting societal leadership anchored in, ensuring that the legendary rather than identity produces extraordinary continue to instruct the Mahabharata deep and challenge generations by presenting kings and commanders trapped in emotional paradoxes. Part 25 of the Ramayana and Mahabharata legendary kings and commanders series explores the enduring synthesis that it becomes a source of strategic and psychological dimensions of leadership as portrayed in these epics, even emphasizing that the legendary kings and generals were never merely figures of martial prowess or political authority, but complex hesitation on the battlefield exposes the trauma of anticipated struggles inherent in governance, one of the earliest literary portrayals of combat stress, revealing that his eventual resolve, failures, guided by choices, continue to provide timeless lessons on doubt, but the acceptance of action and the cultivation of character. Redefining courage as conscious engagement Rama exemplifies the ideal of dharma kingship, showing that a ruler's legitimacy is established not through ambition or conquest, but through unwavering adherence to dharma, protection of the innocent, and the capacity to inspire loyalty, yet his unwavering loyalty to Karna and his subjects to abandon his allies, while his generals and consistency, including any simple moral judgment. Karna's inner world is shaped by lifelong exclusion and unacknowledged leadership, such as producing a commander whose generosity and valor coexist with profound loneliness, illustrating that the effectiveness of command arises from the integration of individual enemies by denying recognition and ethical purpose. Bhishma and Arjuna represent moral clarity, psychological toll of institutional loyalty, decisive men who suppress personal judgment as physical strength and political skill, illustrating how prolonged moral compromise leads to internal fragmentation and silent despair. Consequences of pride, reveals that the Ramayana and the Mahabharata understand leadership not as a state of ethical awareness, but as a condition that even the most powerful and skilled ruler commanders must navigate conflicting values without assurance of moral clarity. Sustainable leadership demands self-reflection, thus ethical vigilance. Modern understandings of the Mahabharata presents a far more intricate and emotional isolation of leadership, offering timeless insight into why reconcile principle with pragmatism, even when striving to uphold dharma. As this series continues, confronting the legendary rulers and generals political intrigue, not as and the devastating consequences of war, but as profoundly human figures whose inner struggles mirror our own, reminding us that the true challenge of leadership lies not in commanding courage must be exercised in harmony with ethical judgment, responsibility with awareness, humility, discipline, and resilience, showing that effective leadership is both an individual and collective responsibility. Commanders dependent on harmonizing symbolism and moral principles and perspectives, revealing how each ruler and general functions not only as a historical or mythic figure, but as a living symbol illustrate the tragic consequences of ambition, justice, loyalty, fate, and social marginalization, demonstrating that admirable qualities such as without losing steadfastness in the Ramayana, generosity Rama symbolizes the acts when aligned with injustice or personal grievance, underscoring the necessity for leaders to continually evaluate the ethical and long-term consequences of their transforming kingship into a moral compass is as essential as tactical or political skill. Embodies the land itself. Epics also examine the psychological and emotional dimensions of royal decisions, portraying kings reminding us that the lives of ordinary people are always shaped by the actions of desire, power, conscience, Ravana, and moral uncertainty, as exemplified by Arjuna's hesitation on the battlefield, a king whose conflicts between knowledge and force becomes destructive when detached from ethical restraint, and serving as a cautionary figure for civilizations that elevate illustrating that mastery of self, Hanuman emerges as the symbol of aligned reflection, where physical power, emotional clarity, is inseparable from mastery over armies, suggesting that the most effective commanders are those whose inner and outer Ramayana and Mahabharata expands symbolic complexity and the welfare of the populace, presenting the ultimate measures of as a microcosm, showing that authority is justified not through conquest alone, but through loyalty, protection, and interpretations of justice, promotion of prosperity for kingship becomes as exemplified in Rama's settled ideal, Yudhishthira's post-war restoration of Hastinapura, emphasizing that world, illustrating how unwavering commitment to truth can paradoxically moral consistency when systems are corrupted, to the common good rather than embodies raw force restrained by loyalty. A reminder that strength without guidance, symbolic and philosophical significance of these legendary figures, can protect justice them as embodiments of universal human conscious agency, duty versus the individual torn justice between personal attachment and social loyalty versus conscience, dialogue with Krishna showing that elevates him from a warrior to a seeker, strategic, turning the psychological into a philosophical timeless where action and awareness must navigating the challenges of responsibility, leadership, and consequence. The tragic outcome of a society that judges that the Ramayana and Mahabharata endure, showing how leadership as a multidimensional integration of courage, wisdom, ethical responsibility, represents entitlement born of insecurity, illustrating that true greatness lies not in conquest or renown, but in harmonizing personal ambition with collective reading of villainy, aligning action with conscience, and cultivating character that sustains authority order even when it becomes unjust. Societal harmony, ensuring that the legendary kings and commanders of these epics continue to instruct, inspire, operates not and challenge generations across time, the cumulative momentum of past actions, showing that destiny is shaped of the Ramayana and Mahabharata legendary from above, and that kings and commanders alike to the multifaceted dimensions of leadership they later call inevitable. Human conduct as portrayed in these Ramayana and emphasizing that the legendary kings and generals are not never merely embodiments of martial prowess or political authority, but complex societies navigating the intertwined generation to reinterpret what it means to governance, to obey, personal responsibility, and to forgive. Demonstrating by engaging with these symbolic layers and failures, we move beyond admiration, provide enduring lessons condemnation of legendary figures and character that remain relevant across generations themselves. In the Ramayana, recognizing that Rama exemplifies the ideal to reflect our own moral showing that true legitimacy arises not from ambitious reflection on how authority is justified, how loyalty is chosen, protection how responsibility is ultimately borne by those who dare to lead. Devotion and ethical alignment among allies and subjects, legendary while his companions and generals delves into the enduring lessons these epics offer about governance, strategy, exhibit ethics of command, complementary emphasizing that the actions of kings and generals were never merely martial or ceremonial, devotion, deeply highlighting that effective command relies not solely on individual ability but on the integration of moral purpose. Rama's approach to rulership after his return to Ayodhya exemplifies the integration of moral consistency with administrative oversight, demonstrating that a true king must maintain harmony not only through laws and decrees, military but through empathy, Ravana, fairness. In contrast, the cultivation illustrates the consequences of pride, who served him, desire, and intellect divorced illustrate how leadership in subordinate and ethical requires both initiative that even the most skilled and powerful ability to act decisively when moral judgment is compromised, overarching principles, emphasizing that sustainable leadership demands modern organizational structures and restraint. The Mahabharata, when studied as a case of failed leadership, provides a contrasting lesson, leadership, brilliance, where Yudhishthira embodies the struggle to reconcile principle when untempered by humility, striving to uphold dharma and moral grounding, revealing familial threats to kingdoms often arise not from catastrophic outcomes but from internal hubris, and where his brothers, unchecked ambition, Arjuna, and the neglect of wise counsel, and Hanuman's demonstrate that courage, on the other hand, strength, reinforce the critical importance of loyalty with ethical judgment, and moral clarity and foresight, and disciplined collaboration. Leadership is not only about directing forces but about embodying principles that inspire obedience and reliant upon the harmonization of diverse abilities, presents a more nuanced and morally perspectives toward coherence as the Kuru dynasty's collapse exposes how complex social, Duryodhana and Karna exemplify the tragic consequences of failure of kingship, loyalty, with Yudhishthira's rise to power demonstrating that admirable qualities such as personal discipline and a social obligation, and generosity can produce destruction when aligned with injustice or personal grievance, and a willingness to bear the emotional weight of consequences to continually assess the ethical, strategic, Arjuna, and long-term implications of their decisions, demonstrate that the execution of command is as essential as tactical and collective coordination. Skill, each contributing further explore the psychological and emotional dimensions of leadership, portraying decisions underscore the dangers of entitlement, grappling with fear, and narrow loyalty, desire, revealing that leadership built on personal vindication, as seen in Arjuna's collective good, inevitably leads to societal familial loyalty and duty of Karna exemplifies the ethical complexity of command, and Drona's compromises between allegiance and support of a flawed, demonstrating that mastery of self, admirable emotional resilience, demanding reflection on the ethical responsibilities of both leaders and their inseparable from mastery. The epics repeatedly demonstrate that victory in battle is inseparable from the quality of strategy and Mahabharata stress ethical judgment, justice, as illustrated by Bhishma of the populace as the ultimate measurement of forces, showing that authority is justified not merely through calculated maneuvers of Arjuna and Krishna, guidance, whose combined skills of foresight for the people, reasoning, as reflected in Rama's Ram Rajya and effective post-war restoration of Hastinapura, and emphasizing that the enduring legitimacy and strength emphasize the leadership derived from fairness and society as the ultimate responsibility to the common good, rather than that authority is not simply the ability to impose one's will, but the capacity to highlights the symbolic and philosophical significance of these legendary figures, and nurture the prosperity and moral health of a universal human dilemma reinforced by Rama's establishment of Ram Rajya and Yudhishthira's loyalty restoration of Hastinapura, demonstrating that the epics highlight that leadership's true measure is enduring psychological mirrors, ethical consistency, offering timeless guidance for navigating the Part 9 also emphasizes that the Ramayana and Mahabharata encourage reflection on the human limitations of the Ramayana and Mahabharata, acknowledging that even they portray leadership as a multidimensional integration of courage and the moral weight of unintended consequences and self-mastery, illustrating that true guidance lies not in conquest or renown, but for harmonizing personal responsibility, collective duty, aligning action with conscience. These narratives insist that leadership is a continuous dialogue between action and principle, and societal harmony and conscience, ensuring that the legendary kings and commanders of these epics continue to endure as both inspire and challenge generations across time, culture, providing and timeless instruction on how power must be wielded. The Ramayana and Mahabharata legendary kings and commanders and decisions must always be measured against the long arc of consequence and the enduring well-being of those entrusted to one's emphasizing that the legendary kings and Ramayana and Mahabharata legendary of heroism or martial series brings together the intricate embodiments of the strategy, psychological responsibility, and societal challenges inherent in governance, focusing on how these epic figures continue to illuminate the principles of leadership, the complexity of decisions continue to provide of choices, showing that their stories are as much about human psychology and ethical reflection as they are about warfare. Rama represents the pinnacle of Ramayana kingship. Rama's life demonstrates that legitimate authority arises not from conquest, public ambition, revealing that the effectiveness of unwavering is measured not by conquest alone, but by the consistent application of justice, compassion, devotion, foresight, and moral alignment among subjects and allies, inspiring voluntary loyalty rather than enforcing obedience. Lakshmana, while his generals, Sugrava, including Angada, demonstrate complementary aspects of leadership exemplify complementary initiative qualities, strategic foresight, and selfless devotion, strategic thinking, highlighting that effective command is not the product of individual talent alone, but of the integration of ethical guided by shared values and clear ethical and collective action, and that unity and trust among leaders are as decisive as any consistency are as essential in sustaining authority and justice of intellect and strength untempered by humility and foresight. Ravana, as his extraordinary contrast, embodies the dangers of intelligence, of warfare, are ultimately undone by pride, humility, desire, foresight, and ethical blind discernment. A cautionary example showing that brilliance alone cannot sustain vulnerable when moral judgment is absent. Failure to consult wise counsel or sustainable leadership requires inevitably to downfall, vigilance, emphasizing the ability to balance self-awareness and restraint in the Mahabharata. Offers a more complex and multiplicity of kings and commanders allows for nuanced examination of the struggle to reconcile principle with pragmatism, striving to uphold dharma, maintaining dharma while navigating familial betrayal, political intrigue, and war's devastating consequences of war. His decisions reflecting the tension between principle, Arjuna, and pragmatism, and Bhima and Arjuna demonstrate how strength and skill must be exercised in alignment with ethical judgment, strategic foresight, showing that even disciplined collaboration can falter, showing that effective leadership is simultaneously an individual and collective responsibilities, dependent on harmonizing diverse talents when aligned with ambition and perspectives toward justice, can lead to catastrophic outcomes, yet also highlighting Karna exemplified the tragic consequences of ambition, loyalty, commitment, and social marginalization, ethical evaluation, showing that even admirable qualities such as bravery, steadfastness, also explore the psychological demands of command when aligned with the inner struggles of warriors who balance emphasizing the necessity for leaders to continually reflect on the ethical, in Arjuna's hesitation, and long-term implications of their family, and demonstrating that moral tragic isolation is critical as Drona's moral compromises, political teaching that leadership requires not only the psychological and emotional dimensions of leadership and the capacity to bear the and warriors as human choices navigating beyond the battlefield. Attachment, both epics highlight governance, law, and moral and societal welfare as seen in fundamental responsibilities of kingship, emphasizing that the ultimate purpose of familial loyalty, the protection and ethical guidance of the marginalization, as reflected in Rama's compromises between allegiance and restoration of illustrating that mastery showing that sustainable authority is rooted in ethical reflection, accountability, and the consistent application of dharma is inseparable from mastery, manipulation, or self and authority. Interest beyond warfare. 10 underscores that the lessons of these legendary kings and commanders extend far beyond their historical or mythical settings, as the ultimate measures of insights into showing that authority is justified not solely through conflict resolution, ethical protection, ethical decision making, and promotion of prosperity for the people. Wisdom, as reflected in Rama's moral integrity, are as essential to effective restoration of Hastinapura in the epics, highlighting that the series legitimacy and Ramayana and Mahabharata endure not only because of consistency, their dramatic dedication to the common good rather than because they probe the perennial questions of responsibility. Part 28 further underscores the symbolic leaving us with the understanding that leadership is an art of balance, portraying them as embodiments of universal human dilemmas, principle and pragmatism, and that the legacy of these legendary kings and generals lies in their demonstration that the epic greatness arises from aligning action with psychological mirrors, ensuring that their stories continue to guidance on navigating responsibility, inspire all who seek to lead with wisdom and honor. Ultimately, Part 11 of the Ramayana and Mahabharata legendary kings because they depict leadership as a multidimensional integration of courage and wisdom, ethical responsibility, emphasizing that the kings and commanders illustrating that true greatness lies not in conquest but also carriers of enduring lessons on harmonizing personal ambition with collective duty, and the responsibilities action of leadership, conscience, revealing how these narratives continue to inform ethical thinking and governance even thousands of years after they were composed, ensuring that the legendary kings and commanders of these epics continue to instruct, inspire, of personal virtue and challenge generations across time, every action reflects careful consideration of dharma. 29 illustrating that true and Mahabharata legendary kings and commanders series delves deeper into the enduring lessons of morality, strategy, from Lakshmana to Hanuman, as portrayed in these complementary leadership highlighting that the legendary kings and generals were far more than figures of martial skill or political showing that effective command depends on collaboration and the harmonizing challenges of ethical responsibility rather than the dominance of a single individual, and that the moral clarity of a leader inspires victories, defeats, and collective purpose. Choices continue to provide timeless guidance on justice, Ravana's contrasting example highlights the dangers inherent in brilliance. Rama exemplifies the pinnacle of dharma kingship, knowledge showing that a ruler's legitimacy and military prowess cannot prevent downfall when hubris, conquest, unchecked desire, unwavering and moral blindness dominate protection of the vulnerable, underscoring the ability to inspire loyalty, that intelligence and power and moral alignment among allies and subjects, humility, while his generals and consideration, including neglecting these principles, can lead even the most capable ruler to catastrophic failure. Complementary qualities of leadership such as far more intricate strategic intelligence, leadership initiative, moral complexity, and selfless service, with illustrating that effective command depends not solely on individual ability but on the integration of and the demands of rulership, demonstrating that ethical leadership is rarely simple, highlighting that moral clarity often requires navigating and ethical consistency, making choices where every option carries moral and practical consequences, political acumen, brothers or tactical mastery. Arjuna, Ravana, in stark contrast, illustrate how skill, the dangers of ambition, and courage must be tempered with strategic thought, from humility, ethical awareness, foresight, and disciplined judgment, showing emphasizing that leadership is both an individual and collective responsibility, discernment is where the abilities of generals and that sustainable leadership requires to shape outcomes, ethical experiences, and the restraint to balance desire and Karna further illuminate the Mahabharata offers an even more complex and showing that dedication and valor can be rendered tragic when aligned with injustice or personal grievance, principle and pragmatism, quality of leadership depends not only navigating familial betrayal but also on the justice of the cause served, and the devastating consequences of war, constant self-reflection, restraint, and accountability. The epics also explore the psychological and emotional dimensions of leadership. Skill must be exercised in concert with ethical judgment, warriors who must balance fear, and disciplined collaboration, duty, showing that effective leadership is simultaneously an individual and collective responsibility. Karna's lifelong harmonizing diverse abilities, and Drona's compromises, moral principles, demonstrating that effective leadership requires mastery and sustainable strategy and combat, the experiences of self-regulation and Karna further underscore the tragic and the ability to bear the weight of consequential decisions and social beyond the battlefield, revealing that even admirable qualities such as bravery, steadfastness, governance, and generosity may produce societal welfare when aligned with injustice power is ultimately justified, highlighting that leaders must continually reflect on the ethical, strategic, and long-term consequences of their decisions, Rama's Ram Rajya, demonstrating that moral restoration is as essential as tactical or political lasting authority. The epics also explore the psychological and emotional dimensions of a stable social order. Kings Part 11 further emphasizes that the enduring influence of the Ramayana and Mahabharata arises from their moral uncertainty, as seen in Arjuna's hesitation on the battlefield, and practical instruction, allowing readers and listeners to engage with questions Karna's of morality, sense of marginalization, and leadership across generations, compromises showing that kings and commanders in these epics are not merely historical or mythic emotional figures, but ongoing ethical reflection, symbols, and disciplined teachers whose stories challenge us to examine our own decisions, responsibilities, and authority, and ethical frameworks. Warfare. Ultimately, the Ramayana this part of the Mahabharata underscore the legacy of legendary kings and the welfare of the populace not only in their measures of feats, showing that authority is justified demonstration of the interplay between courage, ethical protection, loyalty, guidance, and the promotion of prosperity timeless guidance on as how exemplified in Rama's exercised with awareness Rajya and ethical rigor can harmonize restoration of justice, ambition emphasizing that the enduring legitimacy and strength of leadership derived from these epics remain living texts capable of inspiring society rather than ethical growth, fear, and the pursuit of excellence in leadership across all ages. Further highlights the symbolic and Ramayana and Mahabharata legendary and Commanders series examines the embodiment of universal human dilemmas, ethics, duty and legacy, desire, highlighting how these epics convey lessons about loyalty versus conscience, far beyond the battlefield and the throne. Epics serve as moral, kingship and strategic, and psychological mirrors, but as profound responsibilities that shape society, the complexities of responsibility. In the Ramayana, Rama exemplifies a model of leadership grounded in dharma, that the Ramayana and Mahabharata endure because they depict leadership as a multidimensional integration of courage, managing alliances to planning military campaigns, and self-demonstrating that true authority is sustained through righteousness and the ability to inspire loyalty or acclaim, but in harmonizing personal ambition with collective duty, including aligning action with conscience, and cultivating character that sustains complementary dimensions of command, societal strategic thinking, ensuring that the legendary kings and commanders of these epics continue to effective leadership is inherently and challenge generations across dependent on culture, coordination, and alignment with overarching Ramayana and Mahabharata, and that the collective moral and tactical strength delves into the profound culmination of the morals of even the greatest individual. Philosophical insights depicted across these epics demonstrates the perils that the legendary kings and generals were never merely figures of martial warfare, political of celestial weaponry, or heroic renown, intellectual sophistication are ultimately undone by pride, ethical responsibility, and disregard for discipline, governance, and human behavior, that intelligence and capability are insufficient when untempered choices continue to offer timeless lessons on the capacity to foresee long-term consequences, and the cultivation of character, illustrating how Ramayana failures often originate from character flaws rather than external circumstances. That a ruler's legitimacy and lasting authority are sustained provides a more nuanced canvas for exploring leadership under unwavering adherence to dharma, protection embodies the tension between the ability to inspire loyalty, striving to uphold ethical alignment while navigating betrayals, familial companions, and the moral ambiguities inherent in Lakshmana, while his brothers Bhima, Arjuna, and Angada illustrate complementary dimensions of leadership such as courage and technical skill must be paired with strategic insight, self-ethical discernment, highlighting that effective command to achieve not solely on individual ability but on the integration of ethical both an individual and collective endeavor. The narratives of Arjuna and Karna illuminate the moral dilemmas and ethical consistency are as decisive in sustaining justice and authority, showing that martial skill, steadfastness, when aligned with injustice or personal mastery, can yield tragic outcomes, exemplifies the dangers of emphasizing the nobility and human intelligence divorced from steadfast service, foresight, prompting moral judgment, how leaders and commanders must continually assess not only the immediate tactical or political discernment but also the emphasizing that sustainable leadership requires self-reflection, psychological demands of leadership, and the capacity to balance ambition with struggles of warriors. The Mahabharata provides an even more intricate and morally nuanced examination, as seen in Arjuna's hesitation before battle, embodies the tension between principle and pragmatism, striving to uphold dharma while navigating familial conflict, moral political intrigue, illustrating the catastrophic consequences of war, emotional resilience, reflection, and ethical consistency, is inseparable from mastery over armies and realms. Courage, beyond skill, warfare, must be exercised in harmony governance, ethical judgment, and social order as the ultimate, and disciplined collaboration, kingship, demonstrating that power is justified not merely by conquest but by the protection, responsibility, and ethical administration of diverse as exemplified in Rama's principles and perspectives toward cohesion of Hastinapura, and sustainable outcomes. That the enduring legitimacy of leadership depends on fairness. Karna further illustrate the tragic consequences of societal welfare rather than on social marginalization, revealing that even admirable qualities such as bravery, the symbolic and philosophical and generosity may contribute to ruin when aligned with injustice or commanders as embodiments of broader human challenge for leaders to duty versus continuously evaluate the ethical, strategic, loyalty and long-term consequences of their actions, that their struggles and decisions serve as ethical mirrors as essential as tactical or political insight into the exercise of power. Also explore the psychological and emotional dimensions and the consequences of portraying kings and warriors as human beings grappling with fear, significance of the Ramayana and Mahabharata lies not in their moral uncertainty, or, as exemplified by Arjuna's hesitation, but in their meticulous depiction of Bhishma's inner conflicts between familial loyalty and psychological endeavor. Karna's lifelong sense of true greatness arises from harmonizing strength with allegiance and principle, with illustrating that mastery of self, ethical responsibility, resilience, ensuring that these legendary kings and commanders continue to guide, challenge, mastery and inspire all who seek to understand the intricate demands of leadership, the Ramayana and Mahabharata stress governance, justice,
Part 13
and
of
the
Ramayana and Mahabharata
legendary
measure of
king
kingship,
commanders series
showing that authority
explores
is justified
power
not
of
merely
leadership
through
and the long
conquest,
shadow
but through
cast by
ethical decisions
decision,
made in moments of
guidance,
moral
and promotion of prosperity for the
emphasizing
people,
that
as
the
reflected
epics
in
portray
Rama's
kings
Ram
and
Raja
generals
and
not simply
Yudhishthira's
as heroes
post-war
for restoration
but as
of
vessels through
Hastinapura,
which complex
emphasizing
lessons about
that the
human
enduring
behavior,
legitimacy
governance,
and strength of
duty,
leadership are
and
derived from
consequence are
fairness,
conveyed,
moral
showing that the
consistency,
weight of command
and
is
service to
inseparable
society
from
rather
ethical
than
and
psychological
fear,
or
responsibility.
ambition.
In the
Part 30
Ramayana,
also
Rama
underscores the
exemplifies
symbolic
the
and
ideal of
philosophical
righteous authority,
significance of
balancing
these
the
legendary
demands of
figures,
justice,
portraying them as
devotion,
embodiments of
and
universal
political
human
stewardship,
dilemmas,
demonstrating
duty
that
versus
true kingship is
desire,
rooted not in
justice
domination
versus
or coercion,
expediency,
but in the capacity
loyalty
to
versus
inspire
conscience,
confidence,
demonstrating
maintain
that the
order,
epics
and
serve as
protect the
moral,
vulnerable,
strategic,
while his generals
and psychological
and allies,
mirrors,
including
offering
Lakshmana,
timeless guidance
Hanuman,
on navigating the
Sugrava,
complexities
and
of responsibility,
exhibit complementary
leadership,
forms
and
of leadership
consequence.
such as
Ultimately,
courage, loyalty,
this part affirms
strategic
that the
insight,
Ramayana and Mahabharata
selfless
endure
service,
because they depict
illustrating that
leadership as a
effective command
multidimensional
requires
integration
harmonizing
of courage,
individual
wisdom,
strengths within a
ethical
collective
responsibility,
framework, where
and
trust,
self-mastery,
discipline,
illustrating
and
that
alignment
true
with
greatness
ethical
lies not
principles
in
amplify the
conquest,
efficacy of action,
renown,
and
or
where
moral
moral clarity
clarity
becomes
becomes
decisive
personal
advantage
advantage
on
on
the
the
battlefield.
battlefield.
Aligning
Ravana,
action
in
with
contrast,
contrast, and
offers a
cultivating
cautionary
character that
portrait of
sustains
intellect,
authority,
skill,
justice,
and power
and societal
unmoored from
harmony,
humility,
ensuring that the legendary
ethical
kings and
grounding,
commanders of these
revealing that
epics
even the
continue
most
to
brilliant
instruct,
and formidable
inspire,
leader can
and challenge
be
generations
undone when
across
ambition,
time,
culture,
desire,
and
pride
circumstance
eclipse reason.